Chapter 1430. Facing a beginner demigod, Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. He pulled out the firmament sword and faced it head-on. Clink, clank, clank, Yi Chen and the pig-headed being fought. The pig-headed being was a life form in an ordinary universe and had nothing special about him. However, a beginner demigod was a beginner demigod after all. His endurance was thousands of times longer than that of a heaven-defying supremacy. The more he fought, the fiercer he became. On the other hand, the heaven-defying supremacy had very strong explosive power, but his endurance was too poor. He could not activate the power of laws for a long time. In the eyes of many beginner demigods, no matter how abnormal the heaven-defying supremacy was, he was still a supremacy and could not compete with a beginner demigod. Holding a scimitar-like tusk in each hand, the pig-headed lifeform brandished both hands, creating countless blade lights that slashed at Yi Chen. He wanted to suppress Yi Chen until the latter couldn't use the power of law anymore. What made him heave a sigh of relief was that Yi Chen didn't run. If the latter chose to run, with the power of law, he might really escape. The law of water was different from the other laws. Its power was endless and strong, but it lacked explosive power. It was not as strong as the law of metal and not as heavy as the law of earth. Fortunately, Yi Chen had the firmament sword in his hand. The firmament sword was a 3-star divine artifact. Its power was too strong. No matter how the pig-headed being attacked, Yi Chen could always block it and fight back fiercely. It's the law of water. The pig-headed being frowned slightly. To be honest, among the 5 basic laws, he was most afraid of encountering the law of water. There were quite a few laws, and the 5 basic laws were relatively easy to comprehend. They were the 5 basic laws of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. Among them, the metal law had the strongest explosive power, but it was a pity that it was too rigid and easy to break. If one couldn't defeat an enemy, there wouldn't even be a chance to turn the situation around. The wood law had an astonishing recovery ability, but it was lacking in explosive power. The fire law was very similar to the metal law in that it had an extremely strong explosive power, but its weakness was its defense. Among the 5 basic laws, the fire law had the weakest defense. As for the earth law, it was very stable and specialized in defense. However, being stable also meant that it was mediocre. Only the law of water was the most balanced. Although its explosive power was not as strong as the law of gold and the law of fire, it surpassed the law of wood and the law of earth. In terms of recovery, it was not as strong as the law of wood, but it surpassed the other 4 laws. In terms of steadiness, it was not as strong as the law of earth, but it still surpassed the other 4 laws. It could be said that it had no weaknesses. Most importantly, the law of water, the law of fire, and the law of earth were extremely powerful in terms of escaping. The law of water had the water movement technique, the law of fire had the fire movement technique, and the law of earth had the earth movement technique. I hope he didn't comprehend the water movement technique. The pig-headed creature thought to himself. As expected of a low-level demigod. None of them are easy to deal with. This was Yi Chen's 2nd time fighting a low-level demigod. If the demon Saint Carlo's combat power was 100, then the pig-headed creature's combat power was at least 95. Yi Chen could only maintain the situation at most, but he would not be able to gain the upper hand at all. Sword of Hell. A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi Chen's right eye. It was the Soul Will Attack Secret Art Sword of Hell. After so many years of modification, the power of the Sword of Hell was even greater. Yi Chen wanted to see if it could affect a low-level demigod. The pig-headed creature could not dodge the blood-red sword shadow in time, so he could only strengthen his soul defense. Buzz. The next moment, the pig-headed creature felt as if his head had been shaken by time and space, and he stood there in a daze. Now's the time. Yi Chen held the sword with both hands and slashed at the pig-headed creature with the Sword of Waves. Boom. The torrential water turned into a blue sword light and slashed at the pig-headed creature's chest. Puff. Blood splattered, and a deep sword mark appeared on the pig-headed creature's chest. As expected. Yi Chen shook his head. His maximum attack power could only injure low-level demigods, and he could not kill them with a single strike. In other words, if the battle dragged on, Most heaven-defying paragons would die without a doubt. There was no chance of victory at all. His body turned transparent, and Yi Chen turned into a waterman and flew backward. His speed instantly surpassed the speed of sound, and he was completely silent. Trying to run? The pig-headed creature woke up, and he roared angrily. The fang in his right hand shot out. Swish! A sonic boom rang out, and the saber-like fang slashed out a white mark in the void, shooting at Yi Chen. Unfortunately, Yi Chen was a waterman at this moment, and the fang passed through Yi Chen's body. Not long later, Yi Chen disappeared into the deep mountains. Damn it! The pig-headed creature's face was gloomy. He had thought that killing a heaven-defying paragon would be a piece of cake, but he did not expect that he had worked so hard for nothing. What angered him the most was that he had actually been injured. This was simply unforgivable. Terrifying. Is this the strength of a low-level demigod? It's impossible to resist. Near the battlefield, some universe beings were watching quietly, and they were all trembling with fear. Of course, low-level demigods are not people we can fight, but this Green Lotus swordsman was able to escape from the Tusk Battle Saint unscathed, and even injured the Tusk Battle Saint a little. This is unbelievable. Every heaven-defying paragon has their own strength, which is beyond the imagination of ordinary people. As time passed, the titles of heaven-defying paragon and demigod began to spread. Everyone knew that the heaven-defying paragon who lived on the Python Head Peak was Green Lotus swordsman. Hundreds of miles away, Yi Chen slowly exhaled, and thought to himself, my strength is still too low. I can't even beat a low-level demigod. It would be great if my martial yuan soul could break through to the peak silver level. For a paragon, the improvement of his martial yuan soul from the high-level silver level to the peak silver level would be a huge increase in strength. One was a high-level legendary paragon, and the other was a peak legendary paragon. However, Yi Chen usually compared himself with low-level demigods, so the improvement of his martial yuan soul to the peak silver level was not very significant, and he still had to hide from low-level demigods. However, the improvement of the martial yuan soul had one advantage, which was that it could prolong the time he could use the law of water. Yi Chen estimated that the peak silver level martial yuan soul could prolong the time he could use the law of water by at least 10 times. In a forest, a low-level demigod was chasing after a heaven-defying paragon. This low-level demigod had a pair of saber arms, and when he waved them, a terrifying saber chi rushed out and destroyed the forest. The heaven-defying paragon in front of him was a faint green shadow. His body was cut into pieces by the saber chi, but it recovered quickly and continued to run. If someone was here, they would naturally be able to see that this heaven-defying paragon was comprehending the law of wood, which was second to none in terms of recovery. As long as the paragon could continue to use the law of wood, it was basically impossible to kill him. However, the heaven-defying paragon could only use the law for a limited time. After 10 minutes, the green shadow could no longer maintain the power of the law, and the green shadow dissipated, turning into a cosmic creature with a beard. It was cut into hundreds of pieces by the saber chi, and it could not be more dead. Chapter 1431. In a short span of 10 years, 6 heaven-defying supremes of the 48 regions had died, and only Yi Chen had survived. This frightened many demigods. The number of heaven-defying supremes was much less than that of demigods. If all the heaven-defying supremes were killed, wouldn't it be their turn? Of course, Yi Chen's survival also shocked everyone. They were all heaven-defying supremes, but there was actually someone who could escape unscathed from the hands of a demigod. Fang, you are such a coward. You let a supremes escape. The 48 domains were very big for supremes, but they weren't very big for demigods. If they flew at full speed, they would be able to traverse the entire 48 domains in about 1 or 2 months. Normally, some demigods like to gather together and chat. The Fang Sage was not convinced. Humph, what do you know? That Green Lotus swordsman is not normal. He has mastered the law of water, which has no weaknesses. He also has a soul attack secret art. If it were you, you would not be able to take him down. I can only say that I am unlucky to have encountered such a difficult opponent. The law of water? It is indeed a bit difficult. Hearing this, The other demigods nodded. Among the 5 fundamental laws, the law of water was very balanced in all aspects and did not have any major shortcomings. Among the 6 supremes they had killed, 2 of them had comprehended the law of gold, 3 of them had comprehended the law of wood, and 1 of them had comprehended the law of fire. However, the supremes who had comprehended the law of fire had been rather unlucky. He had encountered a beginner demigod thunder battle saint who was very good at speed and was unable to escape. Otherwise, with his fire traversing technique, an ordinary beginner demigod would not have been able to catch him. Thunder steps. Arcs of lightning flashed in the air, and a figure chased after the waterman at lightning speed. The waterman was Yi Chen, and the one chasing him was the Thunder Battle Sage from the Thunder Universe. The Thunder Battle Sage's strength was similar to the Fang Sage's, maybe even slightly weaker. However, the Thunder Battle Sage's speed was many times faster than the Fang Sage's. Trouble. Yi Chen frowned. It had been 400 years since he had been chased by the Tusk Battle Saint. During that time, Yi Chen had been cultivating wholeheartedly and had not shown himself. It was only when the chaos symbols appeared on a large scale that Yi Chen showed himself. He did not expect the Thunder Battle Saint to be nearby. The water movement technique was even faster than the other party's thunder steps. However, it was impossible to shake off the other party in a short amount of time. After all, this was not the universe but the primal chaos battlefield. His speed was greatly reduced. Let's see how long you can run. Thunder Battle Saint was not in a hurry as he followed closely behind Yi Chen. He knew very well that there was a time limit for the heaven-defying Supreme to use the power of law. Once the time limit was up, he would no longer be a heaven-defying Supreme, and would no longer have the power to challenge a low-level demigod. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Chen felt his soul sea boiling. This was a sign that his soul sea couldn't withstand the law power. There's a lake in front. Suddenly, Yi Chen's eyes brightened. At the end of his sight, there was a vast expanse of whiteness and dazzling light. It was a huge lake. As long as there was a lake, Yi Chen would have a chance to survive. The law of water would become stronger in contact with water, and it would be easier for him to hide. Not good. The Thunder Battle Sage was anxious. He had finally forced Yi Chen to the edge, but who would have thought that a lake would appear at this moment? A heaven-defying Supreme who had comprehended the law of water would be like a dragon returning to the sea. Thunder Prison. The Thunder Battle Sage roared and formed a seal with both hands. An impenetrable thunder prison descended from the sky and enveloped Yi Chen. Unfortunately, the waterman could not be restrained by a thunder prison. Electric arcs flashed as Yi Chen passed through the thunder prison's barrier and rushed toward the lake without slowing down. After a dozen breaths, Yi Chen dove into the lake and disappeared from the Thunder Battle Sage's sight. Rumble. The Thunder Battle Saint followed closely behind. The powerful impact raised huge waves on the surface of the lake, causing water pillars to shoot up. However, he was one step too late, and could not see anything. The waterman had entered the water and entered a completely invisible state. Even soul power could not detect him. To a certain extent, Yi Chen had already turned into water, and was no different from the lake. Unless the Thunder Battle Saint completely destroyed the entire lake, he would not be able to find Yi Chen. After a long time, the Thunder Battle Sage jumped out of the lake. Looking at the endless lake, he frowned. If the lake was a little smaller, he could totally guard here. But this lake was too big, and guarding here would be useless. It would be a waste of time. Count yourself lucky. The Thunder Battle Sage turned around and left. The moment he entered the lake, Yi Chen quickly swam forward. The water movement art had pushed his speed to the limit. He was even faster than flying in the air. After swimming for about 10 miles, the water movement art was forced to stop, and Yi Chen's speed was reduced by 1,000 times. Fortunately, the Thunder Battle Sage had been left far behind. Of course, Yi Chen didn't rush to the surface. He continued to swim in the water. After 2 hours, Yi Chen floated to the surface. Looking around, it was all white, and he couldn't see the shore anymore. That was close. Yi Chen wiped his face. He wasn't afraid of the powerful primary demigods, but he was afraid of the fast primary demigods. I have to improve my martial yuan shun to the peak silver level. Yi Chen made up his mind. Before his martial yuan shun broke through, he wouldn't come out. He was lucky this time, but he might not be so lucky next time. After spending 3 days, Yi Chen reached the shore and found a hidden place to start his training. 100 years passed. 200 years passed. 500 years passed. In the 505th year, the chaos runes appeared on a large scale again, but this time, Yi Chen didn't show up. It was as if he had disappeared from the 48 regions. How cautious. Some demigods didn't hear any news about Yi Chen, and they were a bit depressed. Yi Chen had at least 10 chaos runes on him, and he was in high demand. Apart from Yi Chen, all the heaven-defying supremes in the 48 regions were captured. Next, it was the demigods' turn to be unlucky. They were all robbed, and the lucky ones might survive. As for supremes below the demigod level, they only had 1 or 2 chaos runes on them, and some didn't even have any. Demigods couldn't be bothered to rob them, after all, they were too many targets. In the blink of an eye, it had been 2,500 years since Yi Chen came to the chaos battlefield. On this day, a dazzling silver light appeared in the mountains. The next moment, a figure floated out like a silver sun, illuminating everything. Finally reached the peak silver level. And the heart sword realm has also broken through to the perfect level. Yi Chen opened his eyes, and the silver light on his body was restrained. During this training, not only did Yi Chen's martial yuan shun break through to the peak silver level, but his heart force also reached the perfect level. The perfect level of heart force surprised Yi Chen quite a bit. First, his heart force was strong, and his strength was even stronger. Second, his heart force could actually prolong the time he could use the power of laws. When combined with the peak silver level martial yuan shun, the time could be extended by more than 100 times. Chapter 1432. With my current strength, I wonder if I can defeat the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. A thought emerged in Yi Chen's mind. Before the breakthrough, once Yi Chen activated the rule of water, his strength would be similar to that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his primordial spirit had broken through to the peak silver level, Yi Chen's strength was instantly 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his primordial spirit had broken through to the peak silver level, Yi Chen's strength was once again 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that his heart power had entered the consummate realm, his strength was once again 1 level higher than that of the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. Now that he was 2 levels higher, Yi Chen didn't think that the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage could compete with him. They would definitely be suppressed in all aspects. The only question now was whether he could seriously wound or even kill the Tusk Battle Sage and the Thunder Battle Sage. There were strong and weak beginner demigods. Yi Chen still wasn't a match for the truly strong beginner demigods. For example, Yi Chen definitely wasn't a match for the Chaos Flaming Bird King. The Chaos Flaming Bird King was roughly equivalent to the top beginner demigods. With a thought, Yi Chen turned into a waterman and shot out soundlessly. His speed was close to Mach 2. With my current speed, even the Thunder Battle Saint can't catch up to me. Yi Chen's guess was right. His martial primordial spirit had broken through to the pinnacle of the silver level, and the speed at which he could perform the water travel technique had become even faster. The higher his cultivation, the more powerful the power of the rule would be. On the 2700th year since they arrived at the Primal Chaos battlefield, a large number of Primal Chaos runes appeared once again. In the entire 48 regions, hundreds of golden light pillars soared into the sky. With Yi Chen's eyesight, he could see 3 golden light pillars. Yi Chen first rushed towards the golden light pillar closest to him. It's revered swordsman Green Lotus. He has appeared. There were too many supreme beings fighting over the Primal Chaos talisman. The moment Yi Chen appeared, he immediately became the center of attention. Of course, everyone stopped fighting over the Primal Chaos talisman. Fighting over the Primal Chaos talisman with Yi Chen was simply courting death. After obtaining a Chaos talisman, Yi Chen turned into a waterman and flew towards the second golden light pillar at an incredible speed. In less than a month, The news of Sword Venerable Green Lotus appearing somewhere spread throughout the 48 regions. "Chimph, you've finally appeared. Let's see where you can run this time." The Thunder Battle Saint sneered and flew in the direction of Yi Chen. As for the other demigods who felt that they could not keep Yi Chen here, they did not join in the fun. After 4 or 5 days, Thunder Battle Saint arrived at the place where Yi Chen had appeared before. "I think he went deep into the mountains," one of the captured supreme beings said with a trembling voice. Leaving this supreme martial artist behind, the Thunder Battle Saint flew deep into the mountains. His golden soul power scanned the surroundings, and everything within a 10-mile radius was within his scanning range. Found it. Finally, the Thunder Battle Saint discovered Yi Chen. At the same time that the Thunder Battle Sage discovered Yi Chen also sensed the Thunder Battle Sage's arrival. It should be known that Yi Chen's soul was also a golden soul. Although his scanning range was much smaller than the Thunder Battle Sage's, once he was scanned, he could still immediately discover who the newcomer was. "They're finally here." Yi Chen didn't run away and slowly stood up. "Not running away." Thunder Battle Saint's brows twitched, but he soon sneered. He could tell that Yi Chen's aura had become much more tyrannical, which meant that his cultivation base had improved. Unfortunately, even if Yi Chen's cultivation base had improved, he could only suppress him at most. It was impossible for him to pose any threat to him. As time went on, the backlash from the power of Tao would be too much to bear. "Thunder Battle Sage, it seems that you've already regarded me as your prey." "You're very confident," Yi Chen said. "That's right. You were lucky that you managed to escape last time. Let's see if you'll be so lucky this time." The Thunder Battle Sage stopped 100 meters away. "Aren't you afraid that the prey will backfire on the hunter?" Pulling out the firmament sword, Yi Chen was ready to go. As long as the hunter is not careless, this day will never come. The Thunder Battle Sage stared at Yi Chen's firmament sword. The reason why he continued to chase Yi Chen was because of the Heavenly Saint weapon in Yi Chen's hands. "If that's the case, let's see if you're qualified to be the hunter." Yi Chen's figure flashed, and he slashed at the Thunder Battle Sage. Good timing. The Thunder Battle Sage's weapon was a sledgehammer. As electric arcs filled the air, the Thunder Battle Sage met the attack with the hammer. Clang! The electric net spread along with the ripples. The Thunder Battle Sage spat out a mouthful of blood, and his entire body flew backward. On the other hand, Yi Chen's body only shook a little. How is this possible? The Thunder Battle Sage was so shocked that he forgot the pain. The truth is so cruel. "Now, I'm the hunter." Holding the firmament sword, Yi Chen followed closely and slashed again. Clang! The Thunder Battle Sage spat out another mouthful of blood. With a fierce expression, the Thunder Battle Sage said hatefully, "Although you're much stronger than me, I don't believe that you can keep going." A demigod had a gold pugilist yuan soul, which had a strong recovery ability. As long as it didn't exceed the limit, no matter how serious the injury was, it could recover. Every time Yi Chen swung his sword, he could make the Thunder Battle Sage spit out blood. From beginning to end, he was suppressing the Thunder Battle Sage. However, what surprised Yi Chen was that although the Thunder Battle Sage was injured again and again, his combat strength didn't decrease. Every time he was injured, a layer of golden light flashed around his body, and the next moment, his injuries recovered rapidly. "Is this the gold pugilist yuan soul?" Yi Chen exclaimed. Speaking of the gold pugilist yuan soul, one must talk about the immortal power. If the yuan soul wanted to break through to the gold level, the immortal power must be very powerful, and the immortal power came from the rank 9 spirit body. When the gold pugilist yuan soul was formed, it replaced the immortal power, or in other words, the two merged into one. Therefore, the gold pugilist yuan soul was of a higher level than the immortal power, and its recovery ability was more powerful. Of course, the gold pugilist yuan soul wasn't omnipotent. When the damage it endured reached a limit, the physical body would still collapse. For example, the White Pole Sword Saint and Demon Saint Gama lost their physical bodies, and it took many years to rebuild them. To prevent the physical body from collapsing so easily, one had to improve the spiritual body, such as the late rank 9, peak rank 9, or even perfect rank 9. The body refining level also needed to be improved, but most cosmic life forms couldn't balance both aspects. After a quarter of an hour, Yi Chen's attacks became more and more violent. The Thunder Battle Sage felt his body's reaction slow down, which was a sign that the damage he could endure was approaching the limit. The Thunder Battle Sage felt that something was wrong. He saw a strong confidence in Yi Chen's eyes, and this confidence couldn't be faked. Run. The Thunder Battle Sage didn't want to lose his physical body. Although his strength wouldn't drop too much if he lost his physical body, it was equivalent to exposing his martial pugilist Yuan soul to the outside world, which would make it easier for him to be injured. Unfortunately, although the Thunder Battle Sage was fast, Yi Chen's water travel technique was faster. Boom! The Thunder Battle Sage's physical body collapsed, turning into dust, and the gold pugilist Yuan soul was exposed. After losing his physical body, the Thunder Battle Sage seemed to have lost his restraints, and his speed increased again. However, Yi Chen clearly didn't want to let him go, and he continued to chase after him, slashing out with the firmament sword. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, let's talk this out. As long as you let me go, I promise not to provoke you in the future. I believe you also don't want to offend an elementary demigod. The Thunder Battle Sage was anxious, and he hurriedly said, "You must die today." Apart from revenge, Yi Chen also wanted the Thunder Battle Sage's Chaos Talisman. He couldn't waste his time on collecting Chaos Talismans, and robbing was obviously faster. Chapter 1433. Yi Chen's speed was even faster than the Thunder Battle Saint, who had lost his physical body. His sky sword continued to slash out. Although he couldn't force out sword chi like a demigod, the sword light condensed from the law of water was countless times sharper than the ordinary sword chi. Soundlessly, it landed on the Thunder Battle Saint's body. The martial path Yuan spirit became dimmer and dimmer, and the Thunder Battle Saint felt a strong fear. He didn't want to die. With the gold martial path Yuan spirit, his life was close to eternal, and it was not worth it to die now. "I'll fight you to the death." At this time, the Thunder Battle Saint knew very well that escaping was a dead end. Only by fighting to the death would there be a glimmer of hope for survival. He, who had lost his physical body, seemed to be freed from gravity. He suddenly turned around and pounced at Yi Chen. The dark sledgehammer was filled with blazing arcs of lightning, and it smashed at Yi Chen again and again. Fighting to the death. Yi Chen didn't dodge, and his strength rose to at least a level. The Thunder Battle Saint, who was fighting to the death, was indeed very powerful. His strength had increased by at least a level. If a heaven-defying supreme could burst out, so could a demigod, but the price was the loss of the martial path Yuan spirit. A demigod would not fight to the death like this unless it was the last resort. Every bit of the martial path Yuan spirit was lost would reduce his strength in the future, and if it was lost too much, it would be impossible to recover forever. Go to hell. After taking 4 or 5 strikes from Yi Chen, the Thunder Battle Saint smashed his hammer on Yi Chen's chest. With a pop, Yi Chen's chest rippled, and the next moment, the ripples dissipated, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Yi Chen's whole body flew out, and his blood boiled. Before understanding the law of water, even if Yi Chen cultivated the immortal sword body to the 16th level, even if he wore the black tortoise sacred armor, he would not be able to block the Thunder Battle Saint's attack. He would inevitably be seriously injured, and his origin would be damaged. However, after understanding the law of water, Yi Chen stimulated the black tortoise sacred armor to a higher level. The firmament sword contained the law of water, the law of wind, and the law of space, while the black tortoise sacred armor contained the law of earth and the law of water. After understanding the law of water, Yi Chen could already stimulate the law of water in the black tortoise sacred armor, which was like having a suit of water. Yi Chen could tell that the Thunder Battle Saint would risk his life to take a few of his sword strikes and attack him. So, Yi Chen decided to beat him at his own game. Taking advantage of his opponent's impatience, he slashed out a few times. Although he was struck by his opponent's hammer, Yi Chen was 100% sure that he would be able to take it, and the sword strikes would be for nothing. Impossible. Seeing that he could not hurt Yi Chen, the Thunder Battle Saint looked desperate. After taking a few strikes from Yi Chen, his injuries had worsened several times. It should be known that before, he was injured by the shockwave, and now he had to take a few strikes. After half an hour, the Thunder Battle Saint roared, "I can't accept this." Immediately afterward, the Thunder Battle Saint's gold yuanshan collapsed and completely disintegrated. It was as if a golden sun had flashed in the sky and disappeared completely. It really wasn't easy. Yi Chen let out a heavy breath. Demigods were too difficult to kill. He had been suppressing his opponent from the beginning to the end, and every strike could injure him, but it still took him a whole hour to kill him. If he was only one level stronger than his opponent, he would probably not be able to kill him even after 3 days and 3 nights. The gold yuanshan was also known as the eternal yuanshan. Once one reached the demigod level, their yuanshan would break through to the gold rank, and their vitality would be extremely tenacious. In a situation where the strength was about the same, there would not be a situation where one side would die, unless they were determined to die. Only when there was a huge difference in strength would one be able to kill the other. For example, Yi Chen was 2 levels stronger than the Thunder Battle Saint. After the Thunder Battle Saint died, Yi Chen also obtained his storage ring, which was similar to a storage ring, used to store things. Erasing his opponent's soul imprint, Yi Chen looked into the depths of the ring. There were a total of 35 gold chaos symbols and 1 blue chaos symbol. Among the gold chaos symbols, 7 were duplicates, and 28 were non-duplicates. And among these 28 non-duplicates, 5 were duplicates of Yi Chen's 13 gold chaos symbols. Counting like this, Yi Chen had about 36 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols. More than 1/3. Yi Chen nodded in satisfaction. It had only been 2,700 years, so he had plenty of time. Glancing at the blue chaos symbol, Yi Chen had an idea. Perhaps he could collect some blue chaos symbols. If he were to break through to the demigod realm without enough blue chaos symbols, it would be such a waste. Sword Venerable Green Lotus, you are too ruthless. You won't have a good ending either. The Tusk Battle Saint was chased by Yi Chen to the point where there was no way out. Even the Thunder Battle Saint could not escape from Yi Chen, not to mention him. However, in comparison, the Tusk Battle Saint was even harder to deal with than the Thunder Battle Saint. Apart from being faster than the Tusk Battle Saint, the latter was not as good as the latter in every other aspect. His strength is a bit higher than the Thunder Battle Saint, and his defense is also a bit higher. After spending a whole 6 hours, Yi Chen finally killed the Tusk Battle Saint. After obtaining the Tusk Battle Saint's wealth, Yi Chen now had 75 gold chaos symbols, 1 blue chaos symbol, and 48 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols, which was close to half of his 99 gold chaos symbols. Collecting them is too fast. After killing 2 beginner demigods, Yi Chen had saved at least thousands or even tens of thousands of years. If he killed a few more, he might be able to collect all the gold chaos symbols. However, this was just wishful thinking. Yi Chen realized that the gold chaos symbols that everyone obtained were usually ranked at the top. The lower the rank, the rarer the gold chaos symbols. For example, among the 48 non-duplicates of gold chaos symbols, there were 32 gold chaos symbols before number 50, 40 gold chaos symbols before number 60, 45 gold chaos symbols before number 70, 48 gold chaos symbols before number 80, and none after number 80. Moreover, the Thunder Battle Saint and the Tusk Battle Saint's gold chaos symbols had a high repetition rate. There were 27 gold chaos symbols in Yi Chen's hands, and some of them were even repeated multiple times. The news of the Thunder Battle Saint's death did not have time to spread. After the Tusk Battle Saint's death, the news finally reached the other demigods, which caused them to panic. There were no mid-level demigods in the 48 regions, nor were there any top-level demigods. Unless they teamed up, no one had the confidence to defeat Yi Chen in a one-on-one fight. Since Yi Chen could even kill the Thunder Battle Saint, who was the fastest among them, it meant that he was extremely fast. It was impossible to escape. Even if they teamed up, they would not be able to collect all the gold chaos symbols in 100,000 years. The only way was to leave the 48 regions and go to other regions. What happened next shocked all the beings in the 48 regions. The demigods left one after another. Of course, Yi Chen was nowhere to be found. It seemed that he had also left the 48 regions. The turbulent 48 regions suddenly became a paradise for the Supremes. Although the demigods were powerful, they were still Supremes. Supremes could not fly, and they could not come and go like the wind. Most of the Supremes usually stayed in one region, because they were familiar with it. Chapter 1434. Yi Chen had indeed left the 48th region. The reason why he didn't leave before was that he couldn't activate the law of water for long. He could only walk and couldn't fly. Naturally, he left the 48th region to look for Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng. To be honest, it was too difficult to find people in the primal chaos battlefield. Perhaps the two weren't in the primal chaos continent and were on some island in the primal chaos sea. Yi Chen could only try his luck. He was glad that he gave them a set of heavenly saint tools. Otherwise, their chances of survival would be very small. There was a natural barrier between regions. Of course, the so-called natural barrier was only for Supremes. After leaving the 48th region, Yi Chen came to the neighboring region, the 49th region. Yi Chen couldn't find the two in the 49th region. He didn't leave the 49th region immediately. Although Yi Chen was sure that the two would choose to live in the region town, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the population of the region town was already full. Therefore, Yi Chen had to ask around the 49th region to see if anyone had seen them. "Have you seen these two?" On a certain mountain peak in the 49th region, Yi Chen grabbed a quasi-demigod and activated the law of water to condense a water mirror in the void. The image of Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng appeared in the mirror. No. The quasi-demigod was so scared that he stuttered. "You didn't lie to me." Yi Chen's eyes turned sharp. "I really didn't, I swear." The quasi-demigod hurriedly swore. Seeing that the other party didn't lie to him, Yi Chen's figure flashed and turned into a water man. They are both Supremes, but the gap is too big. The quasi-demigod was scared and envious. The overpowered cultivators of the 49 regions were basically all killed by demigods. Since Yi Chen was looking for someone, it could be ruled out that he was one of the overpowered cultivators of the 49 regions. Thinking of Yi Chen rushing here from another region, the quasi-demigod couldn't help but feel scared. This kind of overpowered cultivator who could travel long distances was definitely a true powerhouse. He couldn't be provoked. After spending a total of 30 years, Yi Chen finally swept the 49 regions once. Unfortunately, no one had seen Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng. During this period, he even fought with a beginner demigod. The result was self-evident. Yi Chen had 55 unique golden chaos talismans, 50 domains, 51 domains, 52 domains. In the blink of an eye, another 100 years had passed. On this day, Yi Chen arrived at the 54 domains. Unfortunately, 5 golden pillars of light appeared in all directions and shot into the sky. What a coincidence! The number of golden chaos talismans in each domain was different. Even in the same domain, the interval was different. It all depended on luck. In a flash, Yi Chen dashed towards the nearest golden pillar of light. As the number of golden chaos talismans increased, Yi Chen gradually understood that the number of golden chaos talismans at the end were fewer. No matter how many golden chaos talismans you got at the beginning, it was useless without the golden chaos talismans at the end. It was a cruel thing. Countless beings in the universe fought hard on the chaos battlefield, but only a small portion of them could gather all the golden chaos talismans. 1, 2, Yi Chen was lucky. Among the 2 golden chaos talismans, one was not a duplicate. Now, Yi Chen was heading towards the place where the 3rd golden pillar appeared. At the same time, another being in the universe was also heading in this direction. It was a humanoid being. Its entire body looked like it was made of black metal. Its eyes glowed red, giving off a ruthless feeling. From afar, Yi Chen saw a group of beings in an intense battle. No one could get close to the golden chaos talismans. To most of the Supremes, snatching the golden chaos talismans was a technical task. They could not fly. Therefore, unless they were strong enough, it was impossible to get the golden chaos talismans in a short time. Extending his body, Yi Chen silently arrived at the scene and grabbed the golden chaos talisman. It's the 88th Golden Chaos Talisman. Yi Chen was delighted. The 88th Golden Chaos Talisman was at the end, and it was the first one he got. Leave the Golden Chaos Talisman. A cold metallic voice came from afar. The Supremes looked like they were in pain. This voice was like a sharp awl, piercing their eardrums and souls. It's the Steel Supremacy. He's here. What's the point of fighting? Once the Steel Supremacy is here, even demigods won't stand a chance. The 54 dominions had experienced a bloodbath. Most of the heaven-defying Supremes had been killed by the demigods. Only one heaven-defying supremacy had survived. This heaven-defying supremacy was the Iron and Blood Universe's supremacy of steel. He had comprehended the law of gold. His combat power was extremely powerful, and his defense was also astonishing. Even if the primary demigods of the 54 dominions joined forces, they would not be able to kill him. The Supremes of the 54 dominions secretly called him the King of the 54 dominions, meaning the strongest person in the 54 dominions. Yi Chen looked up and saw a metallic lifeform shooting towards him. To be able to survive, he must be an incredible supremacy. Although they were all Supremes, there were differences between them. Generally speaking, as long as one mastered the power of the rule of gold, he would be a supremacy. However, there were differences in the strength of the Supremes. A weaker supremacy could only exchange a few blows with the weakest demigod, while a stronger supremacy could kill a demigod. That was the difference. I see. He has the cultivation of a demigod. When the metallic lifeform stopped, Yi Chen realized that the opponent's cultivation was very high. He had reached the demigod level. Above the Silver Peak Primordial Spirit was the Gold Martial Primordial Spirit, which corresponded to the cultivation of a demigod. You might have the strength of a demigod, but you might not have the cultivation of a demigod. For example, Yi Chen's Martial Primordial Spirit was at the Silver Peak Primordial Spirit, which was the peak of the legendary supremacy. However, the opponent was a demigod, which was a level higher than Yi Chen. Don't underestimate this level. The higher the level of the Martial Primordial Spirit, the longer it would take to use the power of the Rule of Gold. Yi Chen estimated that the opponent's time to use the power of the Rule of Gold might not be shorter than his. After all, once the Martial Primordial Spirit reached the gold level, there would be a qualitative change. In short, the opponent was a demigod and a supremacy. However, he was much stronger than the ordinary supremacy. Hand over all the Chaos Talismans, and I'll spare your life. Supremacy of Steel sized up Yi Chen. He had never seen Yi Chen before and guessed that he was a supremacy from another domain. It was precisely because Yi Chen was a supremacy that he was willing to spare Yi Chen's life. If it were any other supremacy or demigod, he would have made his move long ago. This was all because of his absolute strength. There's no reason for me to hand over what's in my hands. Yi Chen was not afraid of the opponent. You dominate the 54th domain, but I'm not weaker than you in the 48th domain. We're on the same level. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Supremacy of Steel's body glowed with a layer of golden light, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. Golden armor. Golden spear. There's going to be a good show. A supremacy versus a supremacy. I wonder who's stronger. You're talking nonsense. Supremacy of Steel is the king of our 54th domain. I don't think there are many supremacy who can compete with him. Chapter 1435. Facing the Steel Supremacy, Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. The Metal Supremacy was the most lethal of the 5 basic laws. Even the Fire Supremacy could not compare to it, let alone the Water Supremacy. The surrounding air gradually became moist, and a layer of water appeared on the surface of Yi Chen's skin. This was not an ability that Yi Chen had comprehended, but a function of the Black Tortoise sacred armor itself. Among the 5 basic laws, only the Metal Supremacy and the Earth Supremacy could form armor. Although the other laws could also forcefully form a layer of the supremacy, the effect was far inferior, and it would affect other abilities. Not only was there a layer of water on the surface of his skin, but the firmament that Yi Chen had drawn also had a layer of water on it. Both of them contained the Water Supremacy. Kill. The steel supremacy was the first to attack. In a flash, he stabbed with his spear. The blinding golden light was like a golden waterfall across the sky, giving the illusion that it was unstoppable. Yi Chen had long been ready. The firmament swept across, and the void in front of him surged. The blue sword gleam met the golden waterfall, and an intense sound of metal clashing erupted. However, Yi Chen had still underestimated the power of the steel supremacy and the metal supremacy. As the sword and spear clashed, Yi Chen felt an invincible power pass through the firmament and into his body. Instantly, Yi Chen was sent flying. On the other hand, the steel supremacy only swayed a little, clearly having the upper hand. As expected of a demigod, as expected of the metal supremacy. Stopping his body, Yi Chen's eyes became much more solemn. They were both using the power of the supremacy, but his water supremacy seemed to be more than a level weaker than the metal supremacy in terms of offense, unable to completely isolate the power of the supremacy. When the golden spear and the water spear of the same size collided, it was obvious that the golden spear was stronger. The two were fundamentally different, and so were their strengths. The water supremacy was balanced in all aspects, but to a certain extent, it also represented mediocrity. "You're no match for me. I advise you to hand over all the chaos talismans." The steel supremacy raised his head, looking proud. "In terms of offensive power, you are indeed a level higher than me. However, a battle is not just about offensive power." Yi Chen sneered and a blood-red sword silhouette shot out from his right eye. The steel paragon had no time to dodge at all. His soul shuddered, and he lost his connection to the outside world. The golden armor on his body dimmed, but it did not vanish. Clang! The blue flash of the sword tore through the golden armor and left a deep gash on the steel paragon's body. Silver-red blood splattered. It was Yi Chen who made the move. Not good. The steel paragon came to his senses and hurriedly retreated, quickly condensing a complete golden armor. Yi Chen did not give chase. The Sword of Hell, an attack on the soul and will, was his trump card. It had no effect on a beginner demigod, but it was still very effective against a heaven-defying sovereign. The reason why the Sword of Hell was so powerful was that it contained the will of hell. The only drawback was that it consumed a lot of energy and could not be used continuously. What he needed was to intimidate the Steel Sovereign. Amazing. It's a pity you can't use it continuously. The Steel Sovereign raised his head and said slowly. Yi Chen said calmly, "You only need to use it 3 times, and your soul will be injured. Once your soul is injured, you will not be able to fully activate the rule of metal, and the time it takes to activate the rule will be shortened." Activating the rule power required a lot of the soul. The martial primordial spirit contained the soul, and once the soul was injured, the martial primordial spirit would also be flawed. Of course, it was very difficult for a golden soul to be injured. For example, demigods would basically not use soul and will attacks, because soul and will attacks would not produce satisfactory results. Instead, it would waste their own soul power. Yi Chen's soul and will attack contained the will of hell, which was why it had a certain effect on the heaven-defying sovereign. "Looks like you're very confident." The Steel Sovereign was very unwilling. The stronger Yi Chen was, the more chaos runes Yi Chen had. If he could get his hands on Yi Chen's chaos runes, he could save at least 10,000 years of time. After all, the chaos battlefield did not only have chaos runes, but also some opportunities. Once he gathered all the chaos runes, he would be able to find his own opportunities without any worries. At our level, who doesn't have a little bit of confidence? To be honest, Yi Chen also wanted to snatch the Steel Sovereign's chaos runes. Unfortunately, he could not do anything to the Steel Sovereign. Even if the Sword of Hell could injure the Steel Sovereign's soul, Yi Chen could at most fight to a draw with the Steel Sovereign. If the battle continued, both of them would only suffer. The advantage brought by the quasi-demigod cultivation and the metal rule was too great, and it was not that easy to make up for. At the same time, Yi Chen could not help but wonder how strong he would be if his water rule were to be replaced with the metal rule. He would probably be able to defeat most beginner demigods. Even if he encountered the Chaos Flaming Bird King, he would still be able to put up a fight. Of course, it was not that the water rule was not good. In fact, Even if Yi Chen could not defeat the Steel Sovereign, he could still use the water movement technique to escape. Very decisively, the Steel Sovereign turned around and flew away. If Yi Chen had not comprehended the water rule, he would have been willing to take the risk. The water rule had the water movement technique, which was extremely fast and had a strong recovery ability, second only to the wood rule. It was too risky to force it. The Steel Sovereign left. He couldn't do anything to the other party, so he naturally had to leave. I originally thought that the Steel Sovereign was one of the top existences among the heaven-defying sovereigns. It seems like I was looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. There are at least 800 heaven-defying sovereigns who came to the primal chaos battlefield, if not 1,000. There are bound to be some extremely abnormal ones, and there might even be heaven-defying sovereigns who are stronger than the Steel Sovereign. Yes, there are definitely more heaven-defying sovereigns than you said. Generally, 2 or 3 cosmoses can produce one heaven-defying sovereign. Some powerful cosmoses even have multiple heaven-defying sovereigns. I heard some seniors say that the Emperor Heaven Cosmos has the most heaven-defying sovereigns. Other than the Emperor Heaven Cosmos, there are other cosmoses that are not inferior to it. It is hard to say who is stronger and who is weaker. The surrounding universe life forms discussed amongst themselves. After staying in the 54 regions for over 20 years, Yi Chen left and headed to the next region. Time flowed by quietly like flowing water. Very soon, Yi Chen had already been in the primal chaos battlefield for 5,000 years. Out of the 99 regions, Yi Chen had gone to over 70 of them, and there were only around 20 left. During this period of time, Yi Chen had encountered many heaven-defying sovereigns and elementary demigods. He had even encountered mid-grade demigods. Not mentioning the mid-grade demigod, Yi Chen wasn't a match for them. He had relied on the water movement art to escape. There were strong and weak elementary demigods, and he had encountered the peak elementary demigod before. Heaven-defying sovereigns made Yi Chen sigh. None of the heaven-defying sovereigns that could survive were people that couldn't be trifled with. Yi Chen reckoned that there were many heaven-defying sovereigns that were stronger than him. Yi Chen had even encountered a heaven-defying sovereign that comprehended 2 great laws. His strength was unimaginably strong, and he was even harder to deal with than a mid-grade demigod. Chapter 1436. 18 Domains. Experts gathered here, and demigods were everywhere. 1,000 years ago, a miracle appeared here. It was said that it was a miracle created by a drop of true God's blood. True gods were unreachable existences to anyone. No matter how powerful a heaven-defying sovereign was, he was still a sovereign, not even a demigod. Demigods were just stronger bugs, unable to break free from their shackles, drifting with the flow, not knowing where their future lay. Only a true god could tear off all shackles and be unrestrained. The supreme chaotic will could only suppress them, but could not force them to do things they did not like to do. The true god's blood contained the god's law and divine power. Yi Chen gradually understood that the god's law was formed by the fusion of different laws. Every true god's law was different, and divine power was even more precious. If one could absorb a bit of divine power, they might become a demigod, and a demigod might become a beginner demigod. On the boundless plain, there was a huge crater. Inside the crater, there were densely packed buildings. These buildings were different from ordinary buildings. They were made of crystal, and they looked like colorful lights. The huge buildings were hidden in the clouds, faintly discernible, like phantoms. Swoosh, 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 many figures flew into the clouds. There were heaven-defying sovereigns, beginner demigods, and intermediate demigods. Entering the clouds, one could see that there was a world inside. The buildings were huge, as if they were the residences of gods, making people feel small. In a vast plaza, a heaven-defying supreme was engaged in a fierce battle with a mid-level demigod. Tiger Fang Sovereign, hand over the divine crystal now, or you will die without a burial place. The intermediate demigod with an extremely powerful aura shouted. Meng Kong Battle Saint, with just you? Tiger Fang Sovereign sneered. The saber in his hand flashed, and a large amount of lightning bolts shot out. These lightning bolts seemed to have a mind of their own. No matter how Meng Kong Battle Saint tried to dodge, he could not escape from the lightning bolts. His body was charred black by the lightning bolts, and there were even burn marks on his body. Damn it! Xiong Kong Battle Saint glanced at Supreme Tiger Fang with fear. He had never fought against her before, but he had heard from others that she was extremely powerful and had comprehended the law of thunder. However, he did not expect her to be this powerful. Both of them were law powers, but the destructive power of the law of thunder was simply unheard of. Perhaps only a few laws could surpass the law of thunder. Supreme Tiger Fang, if you can receive this punch of mine, I'll spare your life. The injuries on his body healed in an instant. The ominous space battle saint let out a loud roar and punched out at Honorable Tiger Fang. The majestic fist energy contained the will of a mid-level demigod. As expected of a mid-level half-deity, Supreme Tiger Fang didn't dare to be careless. Thunder and lightning surrounded his body, and in the next moment, his entire body turned into a bolt of lightning, instantly escaping from the range of the fist energy. Coward! The ominous space battle saint mumbled unwillingly, then turned around and left. There were too many heaven-defying supremes and demigods in the miraculous sight. Battles were happening all the time. Sometimes, it was the heaven-defying supremes who were killed, and sometimes, it was the low-level demigods who were killed. Of course, there were also many situations where neither side could defeat the other. The only thing that had never happened was that no mid-level demigod had fallen. Mid-level demigods were too powerful. Some of the terrifying heaven-defying supremes might not be weaker than ordinary mid-level demigods in terms of attack power, but in terms of foundation, even 100 heaven-defying supremes couldn't compare to a mid-level demigod. You might be able to slightly injure a mid-level demigod, but to kill one would be as difficult as ascending the heavens. 100 years later, Yi Chen also arrived at the 18 domains. I didn't expect there to be a miraculous sight in the primal chaos battlefield, Yi Chen exclaimed in surprise, then flew into the clouds. When he reappeared, Yi Chen was in front of a palace. The palace gate was tightly shut, and there were 2 stone lions in front of the gate. One of the stone lions suddenly enlarged and bit at Yi Chen. Swish! With his body turning transparent, Yi Chen dodged the stone lion's attack. At this moment, the other stone lion spread its wings and pounced at Yi Chen. It was even faster than the previous stone lion, as fast as lightning. Swish, swish, swish. After a fierce battle, Yi Chen shattered the stone lion's body, and the rubble scattered on the ground. Pushing open the palace gate, Yi Chen entered. This is. In the palace, a crystal floated there, emitting a mesmerizing halo. Bathed in the halo, Yi Chen felt like his essence, chi, and spirit were like a baby, greedily breathing in. God Force Crystal. Yi Chen reacted immediately. Without any hesitation, Yi Chen reached out and grabbed the God Force Crystal. The next moment, the God Force Crystal sank into Yi Chen's body, and at the same time, Yi Chen's body emitted a faint halo. Frowning slightly, Yi Chen didn't know whether obtaining the God Force Crystal was a blessing or a curse. In a short time, he couldn't refine the God Force Crystal, so naturally, he couldn't get rid of the halo, and if he couldn't get rid of the halo, he would easily become a fat meat in the eyes of others. As long as they killed him, they could seize the God Force Crystal in his body. Forget it, I'll take it one step at a time. The God Force Crystal could allow Yi Chen's cultivation to rise to the quasi-demigod level faster. It would be a pity to give it up. Basically, every palace had a God Force Crystal. Of course, there were also some palaces that had been taken by others, and the stone lions in front of the gate were shattered on the ground. The miracle site could be entered from all directions. Gradually, Yi Chen went deep into the hinterland of the buildings, and he would often run into other heaven-defying supremes or beginner demigods. Most of the heaven-defying supremes restrained each other. Unless they were extremely confident in themselves, they generally wouldn't fight with heaven-defying supremes. After all, heaven-defying supremes used the power of law, which consumed a lot of energy. If they didn't have to use it, they wouldn't use it. Frequent fights would only make them weaker and weaker, and they would become fat meat in the eyes of others. As for beginner demigods, they didn't care so much. As long as they ran into a heaven-defying supremacy that they hadn't seen before, they would attack tentatively. If they couldn't win, they would fight, and if they couldn't, they would flee. After all, there were very few heaven-defying supremes that could kill beginner demigods quickly, even fewer than intermediate demigods. Looking at the 3 beginner demigods flying in front of him, Yi Chen raised his sword and charged over, courting death. Seeing that Yi Chen was so arrogant, the other party was instantly enraged, and one by one, they exploded with astonishing battle prowess. Boom, 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 airwaves surged as the 4 of them fought in a frenzy. Fighting 1 against 3, Yi Chen wasn't at a disadvantage at all, but he also couldn't suppress the other party. In fact, among the heaven-defying supremes, his strength was only above average. If he had the strength of Tiger Fang supremacy, he could easily kill the 3 beginner demigods. The God Force crystal is melting faster. As the battle entered a white-hot stage, Yi Chen discovered that the God Force crystal was melting faster and faster. The reason why he chose to fight head-on with the 3 beginner demigods was that he wanted to use the battle to refine the God Force crystal. Using the power of law was a huge burden on heaven-defying supremes, and the God Force crystal could completely make up for it. Chapter 1437. Battle Sage Kang He, Battle Sage Yu Tian, Battle Sage Dong Yun, I'm here to help you. Right at this moment, another primary demigod charged over from the distance. This primary demigod had ant-like antennae on his head, and his eyes were compound. His teeth were incomparably sharp, carrying an evil aura. Both of his hands were crisscrossing, and one sharp disc after another shot toward Yi Chen. Black Ant Battle Sage. The 3 of them turned around and revealed looks of joy. Black Ant Battle Sage was a peak elementary demigod. Apart from some terrifying sovereign paragons, there were very few sovereign paragons who were his match. His disc could even restrain some extremely fast sovereign paragons. Another one. Yi Chen frowned slightly and swept the firmament sword to deflect the incoming discs. After the discs were deflected, they danced around Yi Chen, and it was difficult to get rid of them. Fighting 1 against 4, Yi Chen gradually fell into a disadvantageous position. The main reason was that Black Ant Battle Saint's disc was too annoying, distracting him quite a bit. Meteor Frisbee. All of a sudden, more discs appeared around Black Ant Battle Saint. These discs were like a meteor shower, crazily shooting toward Yi Chen. Due to their extreme speed, they even created friction with the spacetime of the chaos battlefield, bursting forth with dazzling radiance. Amazing. Just by sensing it, Yi Chen knew that he couldn't block Black Ant Battle Sage's killing move, and he couldn't escape the attack's range with his water travel art. The firmament sword swept out, and sword light swept out like waves. The meteor frisbee entered the waves, and its speed decreased sharply. In the end, only 7 or 8 discs hit Yi Chen, and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Relying on the Xian Wu Saint armor and the Immortal sword body, Yi Chen wasn't seriously injured, and he only spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. Sky Saint artifact armor. Black Ant Battle Sage's eyes lit up. He, a peak elementary demigod, didn't have a Sky Saint artifact armor, but his opponent did. I only want the Sky Saint artifact armor. You can have the God Crystal, Black Ant Battle Sage said. I don't think that's appropriate. Although the Divine Power Crystal is precious, it's more than 10 times less valuable than a Heavenly Sage artifact. Battle Sage Kang He expressed a different opinion. That's right, Black Ant Battle Sage, you have to show your sincerity. Battle Sage Hotter also said. Black Ant Battle Saint clenched his teeth. I will compensate you with 2 divinity crystals. How about it? If a demigod wanted to improve, it would take a long time, but divine power crystals could save a lot of time. 6 divine power crystals could save at least tens of thousands of years of bitter cultivation, which made Black Ant Battle Sage's heart ache. Deal. The 3 of them knew that they couldn't push their luck. Dang dang dang. Attracted by the Xian Wu sacred armor, Black Ant Battle Sage put in even more effort. After all, he was a peak elementary demigod. Once he used his ultimate and killer moves, Yi Chen would have a hard time blocking them. If not for Yi Chen's immortal sword body, he wouldn't have been able to resist for so long with just the Xian Wu sacred armor. After all, there were strong and weak elementary demigods. A truly powerful elementary demigod like Blackant Battle Sage was many times stronger than an ordinary elementary demigod. Hand over the Sky Saint artifact armor and the divine power crystal. If we're in a good mood, we might let you go. Don't be so stubborn. Battle Sage Dong Yun planned to break Yi Chen's will to fight. After all, Yi Chen wasn't weak. Even if the four of them worked together, it would take a long time to defeat him. It was better to deal with him as soon as possible. If you have the ability, then defeat me for real. Don't waste your breath. Yi Chen wasn't stupid. Handing over the Xian Wu sacred armor was tantamount to seeking death. His immortal sword body could only resist the attacks of a quasi-demigod. You're courting death. The four of them were furious and attacked with all their might. Soon, a day had passed. Yi Chen's aura had dimmed significantly. In his body, the divine power crystal's replenishment rate couldn't keep up with its consumption rate. In another 3 or 4 days, he would die of exhaustion. 2 days later, Yi Chen's aura weakened again. He can't hold on much longer. Battle Sage Yu Tian said while attacking. Now that he voluntarily handed over the Sky Saint artifact armor and the divine power crystal, we can't let him go. He wasted so much of our time, Battle Sage Dong Yun said hatefully. The halo around Yi Chen's body was very strong. There were at least 6 or 7 divine power crystals. In addition to the 6 divine power crystals promised by Battle Sage Black Ant, each of them could get about 4. This was a great harvest. The only depressing thing was that Yi Chen was too tanky with the Sky Saint artifact armor. What the 4 of them didn't know was that the 3 level 9 sword souls in Yi Chen's Sea of Soul were being nourished by the divine power crystal and were undergoing a transformation. It should be known that divine power was the amalgamation of all kinds of energy, and sword intent was one of them. If it was just a single sword intent, it definitely wouldn't be able to transform so quickly. However, Yi Chen had 3 supreme level 9 sword intents, and they resonated with each other. Now that they were being nourished by the divine power crystal, they were quietly transforming. Go to hell. Battle Sage Black Ant used the shooting star frisbee again. Countless meteors shot toward Yi Chen. Sorry, it's my turn this time. 3 powerful sword intents suddenly radiated from Yi Chen's body. Among these 3 sword intents, one was deep and violent, exuding the aura of annihilation. One was pure and flawless, exuding the true essence of immortality. The last one was radiant, no filth could hide in front of it. It was the same billowing wave sword, but this time, it was like a heavenly river, vast and majestic. The shooting star frisbee collided with the river water, and its speed was drastically reduced. As the river water slammed into it again and again, the shooting star frisbee was forced back, causing Battle Sage Black Ant and the other 3 to be battered and exhausted. One of Battle Sage Dong Yun's arms was even sliced off. Supreme Mid-9th Level 9 Sword Intents, 3? Battle Sage Kang, his eyes almost popped out. There were many people who possessed supreme martial intents. Among heaven-defying paragons, 9 out of 10 would have supreme martial intents. However, he had never heard of anyone who possessed 3. Even if Qin Wentian was a reincarnated true divinity, it was still too ridiculous. Damn it. Battle Sage Black Ant was extremely unwilling to accept this. He switched to another killing move and attacked Yi Chen. Unfortunately, the 3 supreme sword intents had been upgraded from the early 9th level to the mid-9th level, causing Yi Chen's strength to rise by leaps and bounds. Let alone Battle Sage Black Ant, who was a peak elementary demigod, even a peak elementary demigod might not be able to do anything to Yi Chen. One must know that the Destruction Sword intent allowed Yi Chen's attack power to rise, and the Immortal Sword intent allowed Yi Chen's immortal sword body to rise by another level. With his strength rising by leaps and bounds, Yi Chen instantly gained the upper hand. Previously, he was unable to block Battle Sage Black Ant's killing move even with his full strength. But now, he could effortlessly crush it. Swish! A blood-red sword shadow shot out from Yi Chen's right eye, sinking into Battle Sage Dong Yun's soul sea. Battle Sage Dong Yun let out a miserable scream as blood flowed out of his 7 apertures. After the destruction sword intent was upgraded to the mid-9th level, the might of the sword of hell had increased by leaps and bounds. It could already injure the soul of an elementary demigod. After transforming into a water man, Yi Chen wielded the firmament sword and slashed through Battle Sage Dongyun's body. Battle Sage Dongyun's body split apart as his martial Dao Yuanshan was directly destroyed. The combination of the destruction sword intent and the Sky Saint weapon, the firmament sword, was extremely tyrannical. Chapter 1438. Let's go. Black Ant Battle Sage made a prompt decision and left. He was neither a mid-level demigod nor Yi Chen. Right now, he was no match for Yi Chen. If he was hit by the Sky Saint weapon, even if he didn't die, he would be crippled. This was why he wanted the Sky Saint armor. With it, even a mid-level demigod wouldn't be able to hurt him in a short time. Let's go. Seeing Black Ant Battle Sage leave, Battle Sage Hotter and Battle Sage Kang He fled in a hurry. Before, the four of them weren't a match for Yi Chen. Now, only the two of them were left. There are fewer and fewer shortcomings. Exhaling, Yi Chen didn't chase after them. As the three Supreme Sword intents broke through to mid-9th step, Yi Chen knew that the gap between him and those truly frightening heaven-defying sovereigns was getting smaller and smaller. Half of his current strength was due to the Sky Saint artifact, Firmament Sword. Without it, and before his sword intent broke through, he would at most be a mid-level heaven-defying sovereign. As for the truly frightening heaven-defying sovereigns, their cultivation base was at least at the quasi-demigod level. This was something Yi Chen couldn't hope to reach. However, with the God Power Crystal, he felt that he wasn't far from breaking through. After collecting the God Force crystals that escaped from Battle Sage Wintercloud's body, Yi Chen now had 10 God Force crystals in his body. Up until now, he had only used up 1% of one God Force crystal. There were countless palaces in the Divine Ruin. The bigger the palace, the more God Force crystals there were. But at the same time, the lion statues outside were stronger. As for how many God Force crystals there were in the Divine Ruin, Yi Chen couldn't guess. The Divine Ruin was simply too big. From the outside, it looked like it was only 1% of the size of the 18 domains. In fact, the Divine Ruin had its own space inside, which was bigger than the 18 domains. After dozens of years, the number of God Power crystals in his body had reached 40. His whole body was like a small sun. Wherever he went, a halo of light would shine. In the past few decades, Yi Chen had already refined 10 Divine Force crystals, and his martial Yuan soul was faintly glowing with a faint golden light. With one more step, his silver Yuan soul would transform into a gold Yuan soul. This was a palace that was over 1,000 meters tall. The two stone lions outside the palace looked extraordinary, like the mounts of gods. When Yi Chen approached, the stone lion on the right let out a loud roar, and its huge body suddenly became alive. The sound of blood flowing was like a monstrous wave, emitting a domineering aura that looked down on the world. Immediately after, the stone lion on the left resurrected. The two stone lions that had come to life attacked Yi Chen from the left and right. So powerful. Yi Chen felt an extreme pressure. The strength of these two stone lions was almost the same as his. Their bodies were impervious to swords and spears, and it was impossible to break them. After fighting for several days and nights, Yi Chen finally destroyed the bodies of the two stone lions. At this moment, he was close to his limit. Fortunately, he had the Divine Power Crystal to quickly nourish him. Creak. Pushing open the palace gate, Yi Chen walked in. 1 Divine Power Crystal, 2 Divine Power Crystals, 5 Divine Power Crystals floated in the palace, and in addition, surrounded by the Divine Power Crystals, there was a whirlwind full of spirituality. Wind Law Fragment. Generally, law fragments would not appear in the void. They would only appear in the Saint Artifact Source, or in the Soul Sea of Supremes and Demigods. Under normal circumstances, law fragments would automatically dissipate once they left the Saint Artifact or the Soul Sea. There was no way to preserve them for a long time. The appearance of a wind law fragment here was really beyond Yi Chen's expectations. Putting away the Divine Power Crystal, Yi Chen sized up the wind law fragment. He did not know how to use the wind law fragment. Reaching out his hand, Yi Chen tried to touch the wind law fragment. Kai 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 kai. As soon as the seemingly gentle wind law fragment touched Yi Chen's finger, it instantly went berserk. The violent whirlwind cut Yi Chen's finger, and the power was no less than a heaven-defying supremacy's all-out attack. Frowning, Yi Chen quickly withdrew his hand. With his strength, he did not need to be afraid of the wind law fragment, but he did not want to exhaust the power of the wind law fragment. Without a source of power, its power would be depleted every time it exerted its power. This was different from the water law fragment in Yi Chen's soul sea or the law fragment in the heavenly saint artifact source. That's right, the heavenly saint artifact. Yi Chen's eyes lit up, and he pulled out the firmament sword. The firmament sword contained the law of water, the law of wind, and the law of space. Yi Chen hoped to use the law of wind to attract the wind law fragment. The tip of the firmament sword slowly came into contact with the wind law fragment. To Yi Chen's surprise, the wind law fragment did not resist too much, as if it was treating the firmament sword as a stranger. Yi Chen did not dare to be too hasty, so he gave the firmament sword and the wind law fragment enough time to cultivate feelings. Gradually, Yi Chen could feel that the wind law fragment no longer resisted the firmament sword, and it truly treated the firmament sword as a partner. After a slight hesitation, Yi Chen inserted the firmament sword deep into the core of the wind law fragment, and then activated the firmament sword with all his might, activating the power of the wind law. The wind law fragment subconsciously resisted for a while, and then it was thrown into the firmament sword, disappearing without a trace. Success! Yi Chen could not believe it, and he quickly probed the firmament sword source with his soul force. In the firmament sword source, there was a water droplet, 2 whirlwinds, and a transparent crystal. The wind law fragment has become 2. Yi Chen let out a breath. He had succeeded. Although he had not comprehended the wind law fragment and could not fully utilize the power of the wind law fragment, the firmament sword itself could absorb the power of the wind law fragment to provide Yi Chen with combat power. It was just that it could not be used directly. Swish. Holding the firmament sword in his hand, Yi Chen swung it. The sword was unbelievably fast, illusory, and difficult to capture with one's consciousness. The speed and power of the sword have increased a lot. This should be the effect of the wind law. The firmament sword, which was not very light, was as light as a feather in Yi Chen's hand. As he swung the firmament sword, it would provide a powerful force. Time passed quickly, and soon, another few decades had passed. This time, Yi Chen arrived in front of a 1,200-meter tall palace. Originally, with Yi Chen's strength, he was not the opponent of these 2 stone lions. However, after the firmament sword had fused with a wind rule fragment, his strength had once again increased to a whole new level. Now, he was barely able to fight on par with the 2 stone lions. After a week, Yi Chen had shattered the bodies of the 2 stone lions. Pushing open the palace door, Yi Chen held his breath. There were 6 divine force crystals and a water droplet floating in the palace. The wind law fragment. Apart from the firmament sword and the black tortoise sacred armor, Yi Chen's soul sea also contained the wind law fragment. In other words, Yi Chen could completely absorb the wind law fragment and directly increase his combat power. In the primal chaos battlefield, danger and opportunity coexisted. It depended on whether one had the strength to seize the opportunity. Chapter 1439. Putting away the 6 divine force crystals, the halo around Yi Chen's body became even more brilliant. However, at this moment, his attention was completely focused on the water law fragment. Any law was broad and profound. To fully comprehend it, it would take an endless amount of time. The law comprehended by a heaven-defying supreme was at most 1% of a complete law, or even less. The water law fragment in front of him was about the same size as the one in Yi Chen's soul sea. If he could successfully absorb it, the power of the law of water would double. In this way, even if he encountered someone who had comprehended a powerful law, Yi Chen would have the power to fight. The law of water filled the air. Yi Chen's palm was wrapped in a layer of water as he slowly approached the water droplet in the void. Buzz! The water droplet rippled as if it was testing. When it sensed that Yi Chen had something that attracted it, the ripples also covered Yi Chen. The entire interior of the palace seemed to have become a world of water, separated from the outside world. Soaking in the water, Yi Chen completely released his power of the law of water, intertwining with the power of the law of water released by the water droplet. Gradually, the water droplet moved towards the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows. After an unknown amount of time, the water droplet stuck to the space between Yi Chen's eyebrows, and half of it had already entered his flesh. If one could see through it, they would find that there was a water thread connecting the water droplet in Yi Chen's soul sea and the water droplet between his eyebrows. The water thread gradually tightened, and the distance between the two water droplets was getting closer and closer. When the two water droplets came into contact with each other, an earth-shattering sound came from the palace. The violent water current tumbled and shook, and Yi Chen, who was in the water current, was surrounded by an absolutely calm zone. The water current tumbled more and more violently, and the palace shook. After a long time, everything came to an abrupt stop. In the palace, Yi Chen forcefully exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. With a flip of his wrist, a huge water ball formed. Whether it was the speed of formation or the quality, it was far better than before. The power of any law is broad and profound. Although the law of water is inferior to the other laws in terms of offense, its effects are not inferior at all. Yi Chen suddenly turned into a waterman. Without a sound, the waterman scuttled around the palace. His speed was twice as fast as before. I wonder what level my strength is at now. Seriously speaking, the heaven-defying supremes were divided into two major levels. The first level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against beginner demigods, while the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. There was a huge difference in strength between the same level. For example, some could only fight against the most ordinary beginner demigods, while some could kill beginner demigods. This was the difference between the first and second level. No matter how powerful a beginner demigod was, he would have to flee in panic if he encountered a mid-level demigod. However, the second level of heaven-defying supremes could fight against mid-level demigods. Yi Chen did not know if he had reached the second level because he had no reference. Before this, Yi Chen estimated that he should be at the peak of the first level. He was not sure if he had reached the peak of the first level, but the difference should not be too big. The closer he got to the core of the miracle, the more heaven-defying supremes and demigods there were. Yi Chen was not a saint. He took the initiative to attack a few times and killed a heaven-defying supremes and two beginner demigods. The number of divine power crystals in his body had reached 90. The vast and dazzling halo could be seen and felt from far away. It was like the moon in the night sky, with nowhere to hide. However, Yi Chen was not the only one who was eye-catching. There were many who were as eye-catching as he was, and some were even more eye-catching than him. The number of divine power crystals in his body was estimated to be hundreds. Rumble, none of them were easy to deal with. They all looked for prey to kill. The strong looked for the weak, and the weak looked for the weaker ones. Of course, there were many fights between the strong. Yi Chen was a little speechless. He thought he was already very strong, but he was still targeted by a heaven-defying supremes. I am Supremacy Silver Radiance. It is your honor to die by my hands. This heaven-defying supremacy was tall and perfect. His whole body was silver as if it was made of silver. Without a doubt, he was the heaven-defying supremacy of Emperor Sky Cosmos. Emperor Sky Cosmos was one of the top existences in countless cosmos, slightly better than Ancient Cosmos and Sky Tyrant Cosmos. I am Honorable Swordsman Green Lotus. Please enlighten me. Since he could not avoid it, Yi Chen had to prove to his opponent that he was not a pushover. Die. A golden armor appeared on Supremacy Silver Radiance's body, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. What made Yi Chen squint was that the golden spear in his opponent's hand was not an ordinary golden spear. The body and the tip of the spear were covered in flames. Metal rule and fire rule. Dual rule supremes. No wonder he is so arrogant and confident. Yi Chen frowned. Last time, he had seen a supremacy who had comprehended two rules. However, He had run far away and did not have the chance to face him. Puff! With the flaming gold spear in his hand, Supremacy Silver Radiance thrust forward. The explosive speed was as fast as a spark. The sharpness of the metal rule and the explosiveness of the fire rule were perfectly combined, releasing an even more shocking lethality. The firmament sword was drawn in an instant, and Yi Chen met it with his sword. In terms of attack, the water rule was not as good as the metal rule and the fire rule. However, after absorbing a fragment of the water rule, Yi Chen's level of the water rule was very high, and he could use softness to overcome hardness. Supremacy Silver Radiance felt his flaming gold spear was like it was stuck in a swamp. It was soft and powerless, with less than 10% of its power left. He was shocked and thought, what a powerful water rule. Looks like you must have absorbed a fragment of the water rule. Otherwise, the water rule could not be so powerful. Supremacy Silver Radiance took back his flaming gold spear and said, "Not bad." Yi Chen nodded. "You're lucky. If I had your luck, you would have been dead by now." Supremacy Silver Radiance was very envious. He had been in the Divine Ruin for so many years, but he had only gotten one fragment of the Earth Rule, which was useless to him. If he had gotten a fragment of the Metal Rule or a fragment of the Fire Rule, his power would have increased a lot. Among the sky-defying Supremes in Level 2, he would hardly have a rival. Instead of looking for trouble with Yi Chen, Supremacy Silver Radiance turned around to look for other sky-defying Supremes or demigods. My power should be at Level 2 now, but it's not stable yet. Yi Chen knew that the reason why Supremacy Silver Radiance left was not because he could not defeat Yi Chen, but because he felt that the reward was not worth the effort. They were both sky-defying Supremes in Level 2. Supremacy Silver Radiance could defeat Yi Chen, but it was not possible for him to kill Yi Chen. The water movement skill of the water rule was not something to be trifled with. The center of the Divine Ruin was a huge round building. The building had one floor above ground and many floors below. Surging waves of God power spread out from the bottom of the building. It was the waves of God blood. Chapter 1440. Above ground level. Huge yellow figures patrolled the area. Once they discovered an intruder, they would attack as a group. These yellow figures were extremely powerful, and their defense was also extremely high. Normally, it would take a very long time for a first-stage heaven-defying Supreme Master and an ordinary elementary demigod to kill one of them. The Earthlaw guards were completely formed by the power of the Earthlaw. Unlike the Earthlaw fragments, the Earthlaw guards couldn't absorb them. Whoosh! As Yi Chen moved forward, Firmament Sword was like a formless stream. The Earthlaw guards would disintegrate at the slightest touch. His Water Law realm had doubled. Yi Chen's Water Law sword art had already surpassed its original realm. All of you, scram! In the distance, a dazzling light suddenly rushed over. Along the way, a large number of Earthlaw guards were vaporized. Some heaven-defying supremacy and demigod who couldn't dodge in time were even more miserable. They didn't even have the time to scream before they exploded with light, their divine power crystals sucked away. Coincidentally, Yi Chen was right in the path of the dazzling light. Not good. Yi Chen quickly turned into a waterman and flew away. Puff! 1/5 of the waterman was vaporized, and the rest flew far away before stopping. Hey, interesting. Forget it. I'll spare your life. The dazzling light didn't slow down and continued forward. When it reached the stairs leading to the first underground level, a yellow figure that was 10 times taller than the ordinary Earthlaw guards stopped it. Of course, it only stopped it for a moment. However, this moment allowed Yi Chen to clearly see the other's appearance. It was a heaven-defying supremacy from the crystal universe. Its whole body was made of transparent crystals, and the divine power halo it emitted was 10 times brighter than Yi Chen's. Roughly speaking, it probably had more than 1,000 divine power crystals in its body. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so dazzling. However, the dazzling light didn't come from the divine power crystals, but the light law power, which was one of the top laws. In less than half a breath's time, the Earthlaw guard leader melted and turned into a beam of light, disappearing from the stairs. It's the Crystal Universe's Light Law Guard leader. He's even stronger than the rumors say. As expected of one of the 5 great supremacies of the primal chaos battlefield. Each of them is heaven-defying. Compared to them, we can't be called heaven-defying supremacies. Everyone discussed animatedly, their tones filled with respect. Exalted Light, one of the 5 great paragons. Hearing everyone's discussion, Yi Chen was very surprised. This light supreme being was the strongest heaven-defying supreme being that Yi Chen had ever seen. Compared to him, Silver Radiant supreme being was much weaker. He had never thought that there were 4 heaven-defying supreme beings at this level. They were called the 5 great supreme beings. That was close. Luckily, he didn't target me. Losing 1/5 of his body was not a big deal to Yi Chen. It was just that he had used up some of his sword energy. The profoundness of the water traversing technique was not something that ordinary people could understand. Of course, the main thing was that his opponent was not targeting him. The law of light was much faster than the water traversing technique in terms of speed. Otherwise, it would not be one of the top laws. After the leader of the law of earth guards was obliterated by the sovereign of light, it condensed again not long after, and continued to block the staircase entrance. Soon, Yi Chen arrived at the top of the stairs and engaged in an intense battle with the law of earth guard leader. After spending 5 breaths of time, Yi Chen successfully passed through, and arrived at the first underground floor. He did not see the light supreme being on the first underground floor. Obviously, the light supreme being had already passed through this floor. With his strength, he could have done it in a short time. The first floor above ground was for the law of earth guards, and the second floor below ground was for the law of fire guards. The law of fire guards were all made of fire, and their explosive power was extremely strong. Fortunately, Yi Chen's law of water just happened to restrain the law of fire, so it was easier to deal with the law of fire guards than the law of earth guards. The second underground floor was guarded by the law of water guards. The law of water guards were very hard to deal with. Sometimes, they would turn into a pool of water to ambush, sometimes they would turn into a whirlpool to entangle the intruder, and sometimes they would break apart and condense into water arrows to shoot. Open! A flash of lightning flickered, and quickly surpassed everyone like a lightning blade. It's the Tiger Fang Supreme Being. Amazing. Probably only the 5 great Supreme Beings are stronger than him. Tiger Fang Supreme Being comprehended the law of thunder. Although the law of thunder isn't one of the top laws, it is undoubtedly a powerful law, much stronger than the fundamental laws. There were also many heaven-defying sovereigns and demigods on this floor, and everyone started discussing. The majority of heaven-defying sovereigns had similar foundations. For example, they were all demigods, mid-stage 9th order martial will, and heart force perfection realm. In comparison, Yi Chen's foundation was slightly weaker, and he had not reached the demigod realm yet. However, he had the firmament sword and the black tortoise saint armor, especially the firmament sword. After absorbing a law of wind fragment, the sword's power increased greatly, and it made up for the lack of cultivation. Other than Sky Saint artifacts, the true embodiment of a heaven-defying sovereign's strength was the power of the laws. There were strong and weak laws, and from high to low, they were classified as peak laws, powerful laws, and fundamental laws. Those who could comprehend peak laws were monsters among monsters, and there was nothing they couldn't do. As for those who could comprehend powerful laws, they were elites among monsters. Seriously speaking, Yi Chen might be a monster among monsters. Up until now, he had only cultivated for tens of thousands of years, while many heaven-defying sovereigns had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years or even millions of years. Half a day passed, and Yi Chen arrived at the 3rd underground floor. The ones guarding the 3rd underground floor were the law of wood protectors. The law of wood protectors were all rooted in the ground, and the branches on their bodies were extremely soft, like whips. When countless whips came, even Yi Chen would be exhausted. Other than that, the law of wood protectors were extremely hard to kill. As long as the roots weren't completely destroyed, they would immediately recover. After spending a full 3 days, Yi Chen finally made it through. If the law of water protectors were said to be hard to deal with, and the law of wood protectors were said to be hard to kill, then the law of metal protectors on the fourth underground floor were very ferocious, and their power was very concentrated. Fortunately, the heaven-defying sovereigns here all had divine power crystals in their bodies, which could quickly replenish their energy and allow them to fight for a long time. A week later, Yi Chen arrived at the fifth underground floor. This floor was much more difficult in comparison, because the ones guarding this place were the law of wind protectors. The law of wind was one of the powerful laws, and it wasn't something that the fundamental laws could compare to. The law of wind protectors moved very quickly, almost on par with Yi Chen. Their attacks were very sharp, comparable to the law of metal, and the difficulty of dealing with them was close to that of the law of water. If it wasn't for the fact that he wanted to train himself, Yi Chen would have already left. The fifth underground floor was guarded by the law of wind protectors, but who knew what kind of freakish protectors would be on the sixth underground floor, or even the seventh underground floor. He wasn't the Tiger Fang sovereign, nor was he the Light sovereign. Even if there were any treasures down there, he wouldn't be able to snatch them. His only motivation was to increase his cultivation. The other heaven-defying sovereigns were all demigods, and it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to become an elementary demigod. At the very least, it would be very difficult to do so in a short period of time. But he wasn't a demigod yet, so he could completely rely on divine power crystals to break through in a short period of time. As long as he continued to fight, he would be able to accelerate his breakthrough. Chapter 1441. After spending 3 months, Yi Chen passed through the fifth underground floor protected by the law of wind guards. After spending a year, Yi Chen passed through the sixth underground floor protected by the law of poison guards. After spending 5 years, Yi Chen passed through the seventh underground floor protected by the law of bones guards. After reaching the eighth underground floor, Yi Chen was finally stuck. Although there were fewer law guards the further down he went, and it was usually a one-on-one battle, the law guards on the eighth underground floor were law of shadows guards. Even in a one-on-one battle, Yi Chen would find it difficult to defeat them. The law of shadows guards were shadows. This shadow could be illusory, and no attack would be able to hit it. It could also be solid and release sharp attacks. In order to defeat the law of shadows guards, one had to attack when the opponent was in a solid state. Otherwise, even if the attack was 10 times stronger, it would be useless. Facing the elusive law of shadows guards, Yi Chen did not dare to be careless. He was in his most cautious state at all times. The extreme pressure turned into extreme motivation. Coupled with the numerous Godforce crystals in his body, Yi Chen's cultivation finally broke through to the quasi-demigod level. His martial Yuan Shen became a quasi-gold Yuan Shen with a faint golden color. The moment he broke through, Yi Chen could clearly feel that his senses and reaction speed had greatly increased. The originally indistinct law of shadows guards were no longer as elusive as before. It was as if he could grasp their every move. Kai. A sword flower lit up in the void. Yi Chen's sword pierced through the throat of a law of shadows guard. How profound. As expected of a quasi-gold Yuan Shen. Yi Chen's eyes lit up. At this moment, not only had his battle prowess greatly increased, but his senses and reaction speed had also reached a limit. It was as if he had the ability to predict. The moment his opponent turned solid, he stabbed his sword at his opponent's vitals, killing him in one hit. If it was before, he would not have been able to find or grasp this opportunity. Kai. After becoming a quasi-demigod, the law of shadows guards were no longer a match for Yi Chen. Soon, Yi Chen passed through the 8th underground floor. Then, the 9th floor, the 10th floor, the 11th floor, the 12th floor. Yi Chen was like a hot knife through butter, rushing to the 13th underground floor in one breath. The ones guarding the 13th underground floor were the Darkness Elemental Guards. The Darkness Elemental Guards were one of the top elemental guards, not something that powerful elemental guards could compare to. At this moment, there were more than 10 cosmic lifeforms trapped on this floor. There were heaven-defying sovereigns and mid-level demigods. These cosmic lifeforms were much stronger than the previous Yi Chen. Yi Chen guessed that these people must have arrived a long time ago because he had never seen any of them before. The 13th underground floor was different from the previous floors. There were many stairways here, and in front of each stairway was a Law of Darkness guard. If one wanted to enter the next floor, they only needed to kill one of the Law of Darkness guards. Of course, although one only needed to kill one Law of Darkness guard, the difficulty was definitely 100 or even 1,000 times higher than the 12th underground floor. Without sufficient strength, one might be trapped here forever like these people. Not in a hurry, Yi Chen observed the battle between the Law of Darkness guard and these cosmic lifeforms for a while. Yi Chen discovered that the Law of Darkness guard had two extremely terrifying abilities. One was to transform into darkness, rendering attacks ineffective just like the Law of Shadows guard. The other was to contain a suction force. Moves and techniques are already useless. Only absolute strength is the most reliable. Yi Chen frowned. The Law of Darkness guard was too powerful. If he wanted to defeat it, his attack had to reach a certain level, just like Light Supremacy or Thunder Tusk Supremacy. Billowing Sword. Yi Chen used a killing move right off the bat. A surging wave of sword light blasted toward the Law of Darkness guard. Hua! The Law of Darkness guard instantly transformed into darkness. The surging wave of sword light entered the darkness and disappeared without a sound. The next moment, darkness condensed, and the Law of Darkness guard grabbed at Yi Chen. Its palm contained an extremely powerful suction force, as if the universe was about to be destroyed and enter the Great Dark Age. I don't believe you can withstand many billowing sword attacks. Yi Chen used the billowing sword again and again. The Law of Wind in the firmament sword increased his sword speed, and his attack frequency more than doubled. 1 week. 1 month. 1 year. Gradually, Yi Chen discovered that the Law of Darkness guard's strength was weakening. 5 years had passed, and the Law of Darkness guard finally shattered, unable to condense again. He turned his head to look at the others. A few cosmic lifeforms had disappeared, and a few new faces had appeared. They were probably the same as him and had made it through. Of course, they might have died in the hands of the Law of Darkness guard. 14th underground floor. The Law of Light guard. The Law of Light guard's strength was much higher than the Law of Darkness guard's. Not only could it transform into light, but its movement and attack speed were also quite fast. It was a great threat. Here, Yi Chen saw Supremacy Thunder Tusk. In addition, he also saw 7 other cosmic lifeforms, 3 heaven-defying supremes and 4 mid-level demigods. Supremacy Thunder Tusk was indeed an existence second only to the 5 supremes. His attack power was very terrifying. Yi Chen estimated that he might not be afraid of Supremacy Thunder Tusk, but he was definitely not a match for Supremacy Thunder Tusk. After all, there was a natural gap. Thunder Tusk comprehended the Law of Thunder, while Yi Chen comprehended the Law of Water. Apart from Supremacy Thunder Tusk, the other 3 heaven-defying supremes could not be underestimated. They all comprehended powerful laws, namely the Law of Wind, the Law of Ice, and the Law of Blood. As for the 4 mid-level demigods, they were even more terrifying. Their foundations were too deep, and they were not afraid of the Law of Light guard's attack at all. Yi Chen did not see Supremacy Thunder Tusk, and he guessed that he must have made it through this floor. After all, the strength of the 5 supremes was publicly acknowledged. Only by facing the top laws would one know how powerful they were. Haha, everyone, I'll make a move first. Supremacy Thunder Tusk slashed open the Law of Light guard's body, stepped into the stairway, and disappeared. Damn it, the next floor will definitely have God blood and law fragments. Die. The remaining cosmic lifeforms were all anxious, especially the 4 mid-level demigods. Being able to reach this step, they were all experts among the mid-level demigods. The 5 supremes might be stronger than them, but it would be extremely difficult to kill them. If they could get their hands on the God blood, their strength would undergo a qualitative change. They might even become powerful demigods in an instant and comprehend laws. The martial primordial spirit of a mid-level demigod was a gold primordial spirit, and it had reached the mid-level gold stage. Once it went berserk, there would be turbulent energy waves everywhere. Finally, a mid-level demigod passed this floor and also entered the stairway. I can only take it one step at a time. Yi Chen chuckled bitterly. He had made multiple breakthroughs, and his power had improved by leaps and bounds. But there would always be someone more powerful than him. It would not be easy to get a share from so many powerful warriors. Of course, it was also impossible for Yi Chen to back off. After all, he had already come this far. Fortunately, his cultivation had reached the quasi-demigod level, and he had some ability to protect himself when facing a terrifying existence like Supremacy Thundertusk. Chapter 1442. It took Yi Chen 10 years to defeat the Law of Light Protector. At this moment, the number of people on the 14th underground floor had increased to 10. There were 5 heaven-defying supremes and 5 mid-level demigods. Whoosh! With a flash, Yi Chen entered the stairway and headed to the next floor. 15 floors underground. A ball of blood floated in the air, slowly spinning and wriggling, emitting a supreme aura. Before this aura, Yi Chen felt as if his breathing had stopped. From the outside to the inside, from his body to his soul, there wasn't a single part of him that wasn't suppressed. The entire 15th floor seemed to have turned into a world of mercury, incomparably heavy. Divine blood. Yi Chen's eyes flashed. The blood of a true god was extremely precious, and there were only 2 ways to obtain it. First, the true god would voluntarily or be forced to separate the god's blood. Second, when a true god died, the god's blood would scatter everywhere. If one could refine a drop of God's blood, the effect would definitely be greater than 100,000 or even 1 million divine power crystals. If the god's blood made Yi Chen extremely excited, then the nomological fragments around the god's blood also made Yi Chen extremely tempted. There were 15 law fragments around the god's blood. They were metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, poison, white bone, shadow, darkness, and light. The law of metal fragment was a metal ball the size of a longan. It emitted a faint golden light. The golden light was not dazzling, but it gave off an extremely sharp feeling. It was as if being illuminated by the golden light would immediately blind one's eyes. The fragment of the law of wood was a thumb-sized seed. The seed was emerald green and brimmed with endless vitality. The space around the seed was affected by this vitality. Hundreds of flowers bloomed and vegetation grew. The law of water fragment was the size of a fist, and it was a ball of water. Looking at the ball of water, Yi Chen felt as if he had arrived at a boundless sea of chaos. The waves surged violently, and the waves covered the sky, causing one to feel insignificant. The law of fire fragment was a cluster of flames. The fragment of the law of earth was an irregular piece of yellow soil, thick and boundless. The wind law fragment was a powerful hurricane, more than 10 times larger than the one absorbed by the firmament sword. The law of poison fragment was a drop of purplish-black poison. The white bone law fragment was a piece of white bone that seemed to have grown out of the void. The fragment of the law of shadow was faintly discernible. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to see it. The law of thunder fragment was a lightning mark. From time to time, it would release lightning and thunder, rumbling and flashing. The law of darkness fragment was pure darkness, a darkness that devoured everything. The light law fragment was a dazzling light that repelled all impurities. It wasn't as deep as the darkness, but it was more tyrannical and pure. At the moment, 5 people had arrived on the 15th underground floor. They were 3 heaven-defying supremes and 2 mid-level demigods. The 3 heaven-defying supremes were Supreme Radiant, Supreme Thunderfang, and a supreme covered in white bones. Of the 2 mid-level demigods, one was short and had goat horns, and the other was a 3-headed, 6-armed ancient lifeform of the universe. Supremacy Light was absorbing the law of light fragments, Supremacy Thunderfang was absorbing the law of thunder fragments, and the other Supremacy Heaven-defying was absorbing the law of white bone fragments. Based on their speed, it would take them at least 1,000 years to completely absorb the law of light fragments. After all, the law of light fragments here were simply too big. As for the 2 mid-level demigods, they were absorbing the god's blood. They could only absorb a bit of God's blood at a time, and this bit of God's blood was just a drop in the ocean compared to the total amount of God's blood. Yi Chen's arrival did not cause any commotion. The 5 of them did not even look at Yi Chen. There was no need to engage in a meaningless fight. Law of Water Fragment. Yi Chen stared at the fist-sized Law of Water Fragment. This Law of Water Fragment was too big. It was dozens of times bigger than the one Yi Chen had absorbed before. It was sparkling and translucent, emitting a lustrous glow. After absorbing this fragment of the Law of Water, my Law of Water will increase by at least 10 times. Dozens of times the power of the water rule. This was not a dozen times increase in battle prowess, but tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of times. His battle prowess would probably soar directly to the level of a high-level demigod. Of course, whether he could completely absorb it was another matter. No one knew how much power of the law a heaven-defying supreme could have. Floating up, Yi Chen slowly approached the fragment of the Law of Water. Splash! The Law of Water sensed Yi Chen's approach and a wave of water rippled over, enveloping Yi Chen. Yi Chen realized that after his cultivation broke through to the quasi-demigod level, the power of the Law of Water had doubled. It was much easier for him to absorb the Law of Water fragment, and it did not cause much repulsion or resistance. Bit by bit, Yi Chen slowly absorbed the power of the Law of Water fragment. 20 years passed. 50 years passed. During this period, Honorable Light opened his eyes once and frowned. He had been here for more than 100 years, but the power of the Law of Light he absorbed was very little. As time passed, the power of the Law of Light he could absorb was also decreasing. 100 years passed. Honorable Light stopped absorbing the power of the Law of Light. He could no longer absorb the power of the Law of Light. His martial Yuan spirit had reached its limit. If it was not for the divine force crystal in his body, he would not be able to fight for a long time. Otherwise, his martial Yuan spirit would collapse and he would die from the power of the Law of Light. Since I can't absorb the power of the Law of Light, I'll absorb the God's blood first. To Honorable Light, the God's blood was also very important. He might be able to use the God's blood to become an elementary demigod. Once he became an elementary demigod, his strength would definitely be among the powerful demigods, or even stronger. Who is it? Seeing that someone came to absorb the God's blood, the 2 mid-level demigods quickly looked over. Me? Why would I have an opinion? Honorable Light glanced at the 2 of them. These 2 mid-level demigods were definitely powerful mid-level demigods. After absorbing so much God's blood, they should have gained a lot of benefits. So, it's Honorable Light. The 2 of them did not dare to offend Honorable Light, so they closed their eyes again. On the 150th and 180th years, the skeleton-covered Honorable against Heaven and Honorable Thunder Tooth stopped absorbing the power of the Law of Light and started absorbing the God's blood. The 2 mid-level demigods did not say anything as they felt that the 2 of them were not to be trifled with. On the 200th year. On the 300th year. On the 500th year. What surprised the 5 was that Yi Chen had been absorbing the power of the Law of Light. His soul and martial Yuan spirit seemed to have no limit. Could it be that his absorption is very slow? No, the fragment of the Law of Light has shrunk quite a bit, but his absorption speed is not slow at all. Even Yi Chen himself could not understand why he could continue absorbing. One must know that when he first started to comprehend the power of the Law of Light, he had also suffered from the backlash of the power of the Law of Light, and he did not dare to use it too much. On the 700th year, Yi Chen finally could not continue absorbing the power of the Law of Light. His soul and martial Yuan spirit had reached a saturation state and could no longer withstand the more powerful power of the Law of Light. Naturally, Yi Chen turned his gaze to the God's blood. Chapter 1443. The amount of God's blood was sufficient. The 5 of them had not finished absorbing it even after such a long time. There was still more than half left. God's blood contains the essence of a true God's God power. Whether or not I can become a primary demigod in the primal chaos battlefield depends on it. Yi Chen was very clear that there would be more experts in the primal chaos battlefield in the later stages. This was because the vast primal chaos battlefield could not only have one God's relic. There would definitely be other gods' relics or opportunities. If you did not improve, others would. Don't think that the 5 supremes were very powerful. As long as one of them became a primary demigod, the 5 supremes would have to step aside. Of course, it was also possible for the 5 supremes to become primary demigods. At that time, no one would be able to defeat them. Yi Chen did not wish to die in the primal chaos battlefield and become someone else's stepping stone. Therefore, he had to seize every opportunity to strengthen himself. As long as he was the strongest, the primal chaos battlefield would be like his backyard. Only he could kill others and no one would be able to kill him. In this way, it would be much easier to find Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng. The legendary heaven realm should be filled with dangers. It is imperative to become a primary demigod. Besides the primal chaos battlefield, the legendary heaven realm also made Yi Chen feel a bit of pressure. It was not wrong to work hard to improve his strength. Seeing Yi Chen looking at the god's blood, the 2 mid-level demigods were a bit anxious. They were mid-level demigods. The amount of god's blood they needed to become advanced demigods was far more than what the supremes needed to become primary demigods. However, these supremes were not ordinary people. The speed at which they absorbed the god's blood was very fast. It was almost 1% of what they needed. Don't think that 1% was a lot. In fact, if converted into years, it might be hundreds of thousands or even millions of years. With one more Yi Chen, they would have to cultivate for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. Honorable light, the amount of God's blood is limited. If you supremes want to become primary demigods, it will be much harder than ordinary demigods to become primary demigods. A mid-level demigod transmitted his voice to Honorable Light. Supremacy of Light sneered, "You want to kill me with a borrowed knife?" Yi Chen had been absorbing water law fragments for a total of 700 years. No one present dared to say that they could kill Yi Chen. Even the Light Overlord did not have the confidence to do so. Although the water law was a fundamental law, the more one comprehended it, the more terrifying it would be. His light law was inferior to Yi Chen's water law in terms of realm. "You've misunderstood. We just want to cooperate with you and get rid of this brat first. Then, we'll get rid of Tiger Fang Sovereign and Bone Devil Sovereign," another mid-level demigod explained. "Oh." The Exalt of Light's expression did not change as he sent a voice transmission. "The 2 of you are mid-level demigods and have absorbed much more god blood than us exalted heaven-defying exalts. Why don't I choose to work with the 3 of them to deal with the 2 of you? Haha, Honorable Radiant, even though you are one of the 5 honorables, it would still be difficult for you to kill a mid-level demigod, let alone me and battle Sage Liaotian." "That's right. We mid-level demigods have rich sources. Our foundation is more than 10,000 times that of you exalted heaven-defying exalts. If you want to kill us, you have to be many times stronger than us." Of these 2 mid-level demigods, one was the ancient hoof battle sage from the Earthpiercer cosmos and the other was the ancient multiverse battle sage Liaotian. Both of them were experts among mid-level demigods. In a one-on-one situation, they were indeed inferior to the Exalt of Light and perhaps even Tiger Fang Sovereign. However, it was almost impossible for the 2 of them to kill them. Even if they stood still and did not put up any defense, it would still take a long time for them to be killed. This was the terror of mid-level demigods. "You guys are very confident. However, what you said makes sense." Thinking about how difficult it was to kill mid-level demigods, the Exalt of Light frowned. Several thousand years ago, he had chased after an ordinary mid-level demigod. His strength was many times stronger than his opponent, but he still failed to kill him after several years. Perhaps he could have killed him if he had spent a little more time, but he was impatient. It was too much of a waste of time. Killing a mid-level demigod was not worth it. The ancient hoof battle sage and Liaotian battle sage before him were not ordinary mid-level demigods. The difficulty of killing them was more than 10,000 times higher. However, this person has absorbed the law of water fragment for 700 years. I wonder what level his strength has reached. Thinking of Yi Chen, the Exalt of Light felt some regret. If he had known that Yi Chen had such amazing potential, he would have killed Yi Chen long ago. At that time, Killing Yi Chen would not require much effort. Exalt of Light, what are you afraid of? Even if we can't kill him, he can't do anything to us. We won't know until we try. All right. The Exalt of Light agreed. Just as the ancient hoof battle sage had said, he might not be able to do anything to Yi Chen, but Yi Chen would not be able to do anything to him either. The power of the Law of Light was not only reflected in combat strength. In addition to communicating with the Exalt of Light, the ancient hoof battle sage and Liaotian battle sage had also informed the Tiger Fang supremacy and the Bone Demon supremacy. The Bone Demon supremacy had agreed, but the Tiger Fang supremacy had not. After this person is dead, it might be my turn. The Tiger Fang supremacy sneered in his heart. He planned to help Yi Chen when he could no longer hold on. Not for others, but for himself. Yi Chen did not seem to notice the four's strangeness. He rapidly approached the god blood, ready to take a share. Brat, get lost. At this time, the ancient hoof battle sage, Liaotian battle sage, the Exalt of Light, and the Bone Demon supremacy launched a joint attack at Yi Chen. The ancient hoof battle sage sent out countless hoof prints, each one seemingly engraved in the void. The Exalt of Light's 6 arms each slashed out a flaming saber light. The Exalt of Light's attack was the most magnificent, like a sun, shooting countless rays of light at Yi Chen. The Bone Demon supremacy put his hands together and separated, shooting countless bone spears at Yi Chen. In the current Primal Chaos battlefield, the 4 were undoubtedly the top and most terrifying characters. If the 4 of them joined forces to attack one person, then that person would die without a doubt. Facing this desperate situation, Yi Chen's eyes were solemn, but also excited. After absorbing the law of water fragment for 700 years, he did not know what level his strength had reached. This was the perfect opportunity. However, he did not dare to be careless. Once he could no longer hold on, he would immediately leave and give up on the god blood. It's not certain who will get lost. With a roar, Yi Chen turned into a waterman. Shortly after, the waterman stirred up monstrous waves that swept in all directions, submerging more than half of the 15th floor. The rumbling waves caused the 15th floor to slightly tremble, as if a peerless beast was about to awaken. As soon as the ancient hoof battle sage's hoof prints fell into the water, their speed sharply decreased and they lost more than half of their power. Liaotian battle sage's flaming saber light gradually extinguished, emitting a faint glow. The Bone Demon supremacy's bone spear was very sharp, piercing through 90% of the waves and almost hitting Yi Chen. As for the Exalt of Light's light ray, it was the most terrifying, almost piercing through the waves in an instant. However, it was ultimately blocked by Yi Chen's firmament sword. What? The 4 were shocked. This was their strongest attack, but it could not do anything to Yi Chen. Chapter 1444. Take a strike from me as well. After blocking out the combined attack of the 4, Yi Chen took a deep breath and threw out a wavy sword attack toward the 4 of them. That aggressive wave of sword light almost reached the 4 of them within a second. Puff! Liaotian battle sage and Bone Devil Sovereign each spat out a mouthful of blood and flew back in a sorry state. Light Sovereign was indeed one of the 5 sovereigns. Although his law of light was not as strong as Yi Chen's law of water, he still blocked Yi Chen's attack without taking a step back. His body emitted endless radiance. Damn it! Liaotian battle sage and ancient hoof battle sage had ugly expressions. Yi Chen's strength was beyond their expectations. He was definitely at the level of Light Sovereign. He was not someone that could be defeated with numbers. None of them are to be trifled with. Yi Chen raised his eyebrows. Although the power of that strike was dispersed, it was not too much. Not to mention Light Sovereign, the other 3 only spat out a mouthful of blood. In a one-on-one fight, Yi Chen was confident that he could suppress them, but it would be difficult to kill them. Everyone, I'll take it as a joke. Let's mind our own business from now on, Yi Chen said. Continuing to fight was not beneficial to anyone. Alright, we were the villains. Light Sovereign admitted his mistake and continued to absorb the god blood. Humph. Liaotian Battle Sage and Ancient Hoof Battle Sage snorted and returned to their original positions. Bone Devil Sovereign chuckled, as if nothing had happened just now, his expression unchanged. Brother, I am Tiger Fang Sovereign. I admire you. Tiger Fang Sovereign transmitted his voice to Yi Chen. I am Sword Sovereign Green Lotus. Yi Chen, who was absorbing the first strand of Godblood, replied. Sword Sovereign Green Lotus, there is still 80 to 90% of the Godblood left. It may help one or more of us break through. Since we are alone, why don't we work together? Once I break through to Elementary Demigod, I will protect you. On the other hand, when you break through to Elementary Demigod, you must protect me. Of course, this is only a suggestion. The decision is up to you. Tiger Fang Sovereign said. No problem. Yi Chen had a good impression of the Tiger Fang Sovereign. At the very least, the Tiger Fang Sovereign did not attack him. Brother, you're really straightforward. Tiger Fang revealed a faint smile. Yi Chen was much more straightforward than he had imagined. What was divine power? Divine power was the combination of all types of power, excluding the power of laws. Divine power contained energy, heart force, willpower, domain, and so on. The more powerful one's divine power was, the more powerful one's strength would be. It could be said that after becoming a powerful demigod, the strength of a powerful demigod would be judged by divine power and the power of laws. There was nothing else. The blood of a true god was a treasure of heaven and earth. It contained the purest divine power. Unfortunately, other than powerful demigods, no one could directly convert the ownerless divine power into their own divine power. Most people below the level of a powerful demigod could only use the ownerless divine power to increase their own cultivation. They could not convert it directly, and there would definitely be a lot of waste in the process. After continuously absorbing the god blood, Yi Chen gradually understood the profoundness of divine power. This kind of power was definitely the ultimate power, the most violent power. However, the power of laws was different. It was the power of rules, the way to use power. It was like a technique that could increase the power of one's power by many times. So that's how it is. One of the requirements to condense divine power is to have the light of the soul. Above the heart sword realm was the sword of the soul, which was also the light of the soul. Only the light of the soul could control all kinds of power and condense divine power. Otherwise, divine power would easily collapse and be unable to be preserved. After understanding a part of the profoundness of divine power, Yi Chen's horizons had been broadened. A part of the obstacles to cultivation also seemed to have disappeared. Crackle. In the process of absorbing the god blood, Yi Chen's spirit body continued to improve, from mid-rank 9 to late rank 9. His strength increased greatly, and his body seemed to have endless power. This was different from Sword Yuan. The two were different kinds of power, and they would both become a part of divine power in the future and have their own uses. Other than that, Yi Chen's Green Lotus Sword domain realm was also slowly improving, from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9. In fact, the reason why Yi Chen improved so quickly was because his foundation was weak, and he hadn't reached a very high realm. On the other hand, the Light Supremacy and the others had already reached a very high realm in all aspects, so they couldn't improve much in a short period of time. The only improvement they could make was a breakthrough in their cultivation and becoming a low-rank demigod. Pop! Finally, Yi Chen's Green Lotus Sword domain broke through from early rank 9 to mid-rank 9, and his strength improved again. Of course, Yi Chen also knew that although the Green Lotus Sword domain had improved by a level, it wasn't very useful. At the current stage, his opponents were all terrifying people, and the mid-rank 9 sword domain could only cancel out the opponent's domain. At most, it could suppress it slightly, but it wouldn't have much of an impact. The key was still to rely on absolute strength. However, if the Green Lotus Sword domain could break through to late rank 9, he would be able to easily suppress others. He had to take it step by step. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed, and there was still 60 to 70% of the god blood left. During this period, a dozen people had made it from the 14th underground floor to the 15th underground floor. Unfortunately, they were very unlucky, and they were killed by Yi Chen's group of 6 before they could even absorb the fragments of the laws. They didn't want to let others have a share, and they didn't want to raise a tiger that would bring them trouble. After all, once one absorbed a large amount of the laws, it would be very hard to kill them. Yi Chen was a living example. Another 1,000 years had passed, and there was still half of the god blood left. Haha, how can I miss out on absorbing the god blood? On this day, a figure came from the 14th underground floor to the 15th floor. It was a heaven-defying supreme filled with endless death aura, and his eyes were emitting a frightening light. The dead supreme. The light supremacy revealed a look of fear. The dead supreme was one of the 5 supremacies, and what he comprehended was the death law, which was one of the top laws like the light law. Moreover, from the looks of it, he should have obtained a lot of benefits in other places. The death aura was extremely dense, and his realm was no lower than the light supreme. Let's deal with him together. The light supremacy suddenly said. All right. Everyone, including Yi Chen, agreed one after another. Kill. The 6 of them unleashed a powerful attack, blasting at the dead supreme. Hehe, you want to kill me? In your next life. I comprehended the death law, and I'm already in a state of death. How can you kill me? The dead supreme did not care about the attack that was blasting at him, and he took it head-on. In this way, the dead supreme also joined the ranks of absorbing the god blood, and the number of people became 7 from 6. On the 4,000 years, only 40% of the god blood was left, and the battle broke out again. This time, it was Yi Chen's group of 5 against the ancient hoof battle sage and the burning sky battle sage. The main reason was that the 2 absorbed the god blood too quickly. The 5 decided to spend some time to kill the 2, even if it took them 1 or 2,000 years. Chapter 1445. Do you really think we're pushovers that you can bully? Humph, since you want to expel us, then don't even think about absorbing the divine blood. The 2 were fearless. They had absorbed most of the divine blood and their cultivation had improved rapidly. Their gold primordial spirits had reached the peak of midstage, which was many times stronger than before. Kill. Supremacy of light was the first to attack the 2. Countless rays of light shot out. PFFF, PFFF. The 2 retreated with difficulty, blood dripping from the corners of their mouths. Supremacy of light's attacks were very domineering. Each ray of light was extraordinarily powerful. They had no way to fight back. The sovereign of the dead's attack was much more bizarre. He rubbed his hands together, and thousands of poisonous snakes made of black mist pounced at the green hoof battle sage and scorching sky battle sage, leaving shallow marks on their bodies. These shallow marks were like living creatures, slowly wriggling and absorbing the vitality and aura of the 2. Of course, mid-level demigods were mid-level demigods. With a flash of light, all the shallow marks disappeared as if they had never existed. The sovereign of the dead was not surprised by this. The ancient hoof war sage and the burning sky war sage were peak mid-level demigods. Other than high-level demigods, no one could easily kill them. It would take a long time to kill them. Whoosh. If supremacy of light's attacks were domineering and supremacy of the dead strange, then Yi Chen's attacks were mighty and endless. In terms of offensive power, even Light Supreme was inferior to Yi Chen. In the void, the blue sword light converged to form an ocean wave that battered ancient hoof battle saint and burning sky battle saint, forcing them to retreat without a trace of power to counterattack. As for Tiger Fang and Bone Devil, they were much weaker than the 3, but they could more or less exhaust the ancient hoof war saint and scorching sky war saint's origin energy. Their usefulness was not to be underestimated. After 100 years, the ancient hoof war saint and scorching sky war saint's auras had weakened significantly. Damn it. After 100 years of beating, the ancient hoof battle saint's eyes were almost spewing fire. I'll let you be arrogant for now. Let's see how long you can keep attacking. Scorching sky battle saint said fiercely. After 1,000 years, the 2's auras had weakened by more than 30%. It's actually so hard to kill. Even though they had mentally prepared themselves, Yi Chen and the others were still shocked. Originally, they had estimated that they would be able to kill the 2 of them in 1,000 years. Unexpectedly, The two of them had only weakened by 30%. Although the two of them would become weaker as time passed, it would definitely take more than 2,000 years to completely kill them. What surprised Yi Chen and the others even more was that in the next 500 years, the auras of the two war saints did not decline. Instead, they grew stronger and recovered to 80% of their original strength. As it turned out, although the two of them had been in a state of constant beatings, it had also played a role in tempering themselves. The divine blood they had absorbed earlier had quickly turned into nutrients to replenish their bodies. This won't do. If this continues, they might not die. Instead, we will be exhausted to death. The Exalt of Light frowned. That's right. They're using us to transform the power in the god's blood, Yi Chen said as he exhaled. Why don't we take turns to attack them, and the rest will absorb the god's blood? The Venerable of the Dead suggested. How should we distribute it? Bone Devil Supreme's eyes flashed. It's very simple. 3 people attack, and 2 people absorb the god's blood. We'll rotate once every 100 years. In the 100th year, Yi Chen, the Venerable of the Dead, and the Venerable of the Dead attacked the War Saints, while the Venerable of Light and the Venerable of Tiger Fang absorbed the god's blood. Seeing this situation, the War Saints and the Venerable of the Dead's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Previously, they were still in the mood to waste time with Yi Chen and the others, but now they had completely lost the mood. After a long time, the remaining god's blood would definitely be absorbed, and there would be no share for them. They still wanted to rely on the god's blood to advance to high-level demigods. Damn it, die for me. The War Saints of the Dead and the Venerable of the Dead erupted with their strongest combat strength. Before this, they were only ordinary combat strength. Unfortunately, Yi Chen and the Venerable of the Dead were not to be trifled with. They easily suppressed the two, and no matter how much they roared, they could do nothing. After 100 years, it was the Venerable of Light, the Venerable of the Dead, and Yi Chen attacking the two, while the Venerable of the Dead and the Venerable of the Dead absorbed the god's blood. Because only 2 people could absorb the god's blood at a time, it was still not Yi Chen's turn this time. But it didn't matter. He would be compensated later, and no one was willing to suffer a loss. Soon, 1,000 years passed. The god's blood shrank slightly, but there was not much change. The 5 were, after all, heaven-defying supremes. Their efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was far lower than that of mid-level demigods, especially when 3 of them had to deal with the War Saints. Too slow. Altogether, 6 or 7,000 years had passed. Yi Chen felt that the efficiency of absorbing the god's blood was too slow. At this rate, it would take at least tens of thousands of years. The higher the cultivation, the faster the absorption. It has little to do with strength. Yi Chen thought. Unknowingly, Yi Chen had been in the 15th underground floor for 9,000 years. Ah! With a scream, the Battle Saint of the Dead instantly turned into a ball of golden flames, burning. This was the burning of the gold martial path Yuan spirit. The golden ashes danced in the air, and the next moment, they returned to nothingness. The Battle Saint of the Dead had fallen. After spending 5,000 years, the 5 finally killed the Battle Saint of the Dead. This was mainly related to the distribution. Every 100 years, 2 of the 5 would be able to rest and absorb the god's blood. The War Saint of the Dead and the Battle Saint of the Dead were constantly fighting and had no time to rest. Moreover, they couldn't find the exit to the 15th underground floor, so they couldn't even escape. In the 9,500th year, the War Saint of the Dead was forced to his limit. Faint golden sparks flickered on his body, a sign that the gold martial path Yuan spirit was burning. Bastard, I can't accept this. The War Saint of the Dead roared at the sky. The battle prowess that erupted shocked even the Venerable of Light, the Dead, and the Bone Devil Supremes. This was the final radiance of the dead and was no small matter. Come on. The Venerable of Light sped up. The Venerable of Dead and the Bone Devil Supremes nodded. As long as the War Saint of the Dead was taken care of, they could calm down and absorb the god's blood. In any case, their absorption speed was very slow, so they didn't need to worry about not having enough god's blood to absorb. As for the future, no one could be bothered. Swoosh. The war saint of the dead was instantly engulfed by the golden flames. Careful. Suddenly, the venerable of dead seemed to have discovered something and disappeared from his original position. The venerable of light's reaction was a bit slower than the venerable of dead's, but the venerable of light was faster and immediately retreated. Only the Bone Devil Supremes couldn't react in time and was struck by a powerful flaming hoof print. Fart. The Bone Devil Supremes didn't even have time to groan before disappearing into nothingness. The two of them turned into a ray of light and a wisp of black mist, quickly escaping. The 15th underground level was very large. Every inch of space had been transformed by the divine blood. It was like a small universe. Trying to escape. The Green Hoof War Saint didn't do anything, but his location began to shake. A moment later, space twisted as he appeared behind the radiant autarch and punched. Just as the deep hoof print was about to engrave itself onto the Radiant Supremacy's body, the Radiant Supremacy abruptly transformed into a golden sun, turning from a corporeal body into an incorporeal body. Puff! The hoof print pierced through the golden sun, causing it to shatter. It then reformed into the body of the Sovereign of Light. However, his face was extremely pale. Relying on the law of light, he had withstood the attack of the Greenhoof Battle Saint, but a high-grade demigod was too powerful. Even in his incorporeal form, he was still heavily injured. It was easy to imagine that once he returned to his physical form, he would undoubtedly die. How enviable! The law of light is even greater than I imagined. The ancient Hoof War Saint was indignant. He hated all heaven-defying supremes for being able to comprehend laws in advance. This was too unfair. Swordsman Azure Lotus, the situation isn't looking good. Tiger Fang and Yi Chen had already noticed the changes in the Green Hoof War Saint. Tiger Fang said in a low voice, "You find the exit first. Take the chance to kill the Radiant Supremacy and the Dead Supremacy," Yi Chen said. "What about you?" Tiger Fang looked at Yi Chen. "I plan to give it a try." Yi Chen felt that the three Supreme Sword Intents were showing signs of a breakthrough. After coming to the Primal Chaos battlefield, the three Supreme Sword Intents had already broken through once, from early stage to mid-stage 9th rank. This greatly increased his strength. He originally thought that it would be impossible for him to continue breaking through in the Primal Chaos battlefield. Even if he wanted to break through, he would probably have to wait until he became an elementary demigod. However, after absorbing 9,000 years of divine blood, the three Supreme Sword Intents had the possibility of breaking through again. Of course, this was mainly because the three Supreme Sword Intents existed in Yi Chen's Soul Sea at the same time, creating a resonance effect. If there was only one Supreme Sword Intent, it would be impossible for him to break through so quickly. Give it a try. Alright, I'll take my leave first. Sensing that Yi Chen wasn't joking, Tiger Fang nodded and quickly left. I don't think I can escape even if I try to escape now. I might as well give it a try. If there was an exit, Yi Chen would not hesitate to escape from it. Unfortunately, the exit to the 15th floor had not been found yet. Wasting time searching for an exit was unacceptable to Yi Chen. Floating near the god's blood, Yi Chen closed his eyes and continued to absorb the god's blood. Run. Why aren't you running anymore? Puff. Pu, pu. Pu 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 pu. The ancient Hoof War Saint laughed maniacally as he pierced through the golden sun and black mist again and again. The laws of light and death were indeed powerful. In terms of power, the ancient Hoof War Saint was at least 10,000 times stronger than the Radiant Sovereign and King Sovereign. Alas, he still couldn't kill the two in a short time. He could only heavily injure them and wear down their martial nascent spirits. Ancient Hoof War Saint, why are you so ruthless? If you can spare me, I'm willing to become your servant. The Sovereign of the Dead said humbly. Comprehending the law of death made him cherish his life even more and would not easily give up. Servant. Sorry, I don't need it. I just want to see you die. The ancient Hoof War Saint grinned and continued to attack. Again and again. No. The golden sun burst into millions of rays and the roar of the radiant sovereign could be heard. Unfortunately, the rays could no longer condense and gradually disappeared into the void. One of the 5 sovereigns, the radiant sovereign, had fallen. The sovereign of the dead's heart tightened and he frantically fled. In terms of survivability, the law of death was much stronger than the law of light, but the difference in strength was too great. The sovereign of the dead still could not escape death. The black mist dissipated and a black seed fell. Crack! The ancient hoof-war saint shattered the black seed. The law of death was strange and unpredictable, so he did not think that the sovereign of the dead was completely dead. Sure enough, the moment the black seed shattered, the sovereign of the dead screamed and stopped abruptly. After killing the radiant sovereign and the sovereign of the dead, the ancient hoof-war saint began to chase after Tiger Fang. A year later, Supreme Tiger Fang fell. In the end, it was Yi Chen, who did not take any action, who survived. You're very lucky that you didn't take any action. That's why I left you for last. The ancient hoof-war saint walked towards Yi Chen step by step, each step causing the void to tremble. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.